the National Television Network and to the live sitting of the House of Assembly for today, Tuesday, March 19. My name is Virgil Leonti, and our Creole announcer, Michael Gasco, will not be in with us today. Well, the order paper for today reads as follows. There are several statements to be laid by the Prime Minister. Some of these include a statutory instrument on the excise tax amendment and a statutory instrument on the Public Finance Management Act. Other papers to be laid by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information. There are papers also to be laid by the Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperative and Consumer Affairs. Now there are also included on today's business 3 motions. The first motion to be tabled by the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development, the Youth Economy, Justice and National Security. And it reads as follows. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount of special drawing rights, that is $30,500,000 alone from the International Development Association to finance the St. Lucia's Sustainable Recovery Development Policy financing. And no doubt we will be getting more details on what is involved when the motion is laid. Also to be presented by the Prime Minister, and it reads as follows. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to establish a special fund to be known as the Tourism Development Fund for the purpose of facilitating the operations, tourism development and tourism marketing of the Department of Tourism. There is a third motion. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee an amount of $80 million alone from the First National Bank of St. Lucia Limited to the National Lotteries Authority to assist with the financing of a youth and sports infrastructure program. And that motion, the loan, will be repayable in 15 years in biannual payments of $3,571,000. And there is a fourth motion. There is a fourth motion to be laid by the Prime Minister, and it reads that Parliament approves the establishment of the Women's Parliament Caucus, herein referred to as the Women's Parliamentary Caucus of St. Lucia. The proceedings are about to get underway, so we take the live to the chambers.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding, we thine unholy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we have in thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good morning, members. Members, you You may elect your deputy speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it has always been the policy and the philosophical position of governments to follow the Constitution. This country, under the last government, operated for 5 years without a deputy speaker. We spoke about it and we promised the electorate that when in government, we would ensure that there was a deputy speaker. We kept our promise, and we caused that promise to be put in the Constitution of St. Lucia. The deputy speaker at the time, the Honorable Jeremiah Norbert, was selected by me to be a minister of government, and he had to resign from the deputy speaker position. I informed the public of St. Lucia that at the next sitting of this honorable house, we would have elected a deputy speaker. And the deputy speaker would have been either from inside the house or outside the house. Either a member of the house or a member who is not presently a member of the house. I never made any statement to say that the deputy speaker would be a member not in the house. I said it would be a member either in the house or out of the house. You check the press statement, you will see what I said. So the misinformation continues. I never said that the deputy speaker would come from out of the house. I never said so. So, Mr. Speaker, it's my honor and my privilege to nominate Dr. Kenny Davis Anthony as Deputy Speaker.
Are there any other nominees?
Kasui second.
Oh, member for Kasui South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to second the nomination.
So noted. Are there any other nominees? If there are no other nominees,
Mr. Speaker.
I hereby declare the member. So, yes? Yes, member for Kasui Central.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to nominate the member for Miku South to be the deputy speaker.
Well, you can't nominate the leader of the opposition, who also happens to be the member from Miku South. If there are no other nominees, I hereby declare the member for Vieux-Fort South elected deputy speaker unopposed. Announcements. I beg to announce that His Excellency, the Acting Governor General, has been pleased to assent to the Tourism Development Act. Members, I am in receipt of correspondence from the member for Dennery South advising of his unavailability for today's sitting. I wish to inform members that the Constitutional Review Committee held its inaugural meeting on Wednesday, March 6, 2024. As its first order of business, the committee elected Claudius Francis and Ignatius Jean as chairperson and deputy chairperson, respectively. The meeting also considered the way forward and adjourned to April 8th, 2024. I also wish to inform members that the Boundaries Commission has thus far held 3 meetings. At our last meeting, the Commission directed the chairman to summon 2 witnesses for interviews. Both witnesses have agreed to attend a meeting scheduled for Friday, 22nd March 2024. The Office of the Speaker of St. Lucia on Thursday, 7th April 2024, received a delegation from the Parliament of Canada with a view to arranging a twinning regime between the two parliaments. During the meeting, the Parliament of St. Lucia made known its areas of most need. To this end, the Parliament of Canada agreed to source and provide the Parliament of St. Lucia with a voice-to-text program which would better enable us to provide a speedier handset. Interestingly, the program being sourced will also allow for the translation of Creole spoken in the House. It was further agreed that the Canadian Parliament will provide training for all of the Parliament staff, with a priority being given to the librarian. Statement from ministers. Papers to be laid. Finance, Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Economic Development, Youth Economy, Justice and National Security.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statute Instrument number 8 of 2024, Legal Profession Eligibility, Gabriel and Galileo Order. Statute Instrument number 10 of 2024, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule number 1, number 3 Order. Statute Instrument number 11 of 2024, Credit Reporting Regulations. Statute Instrument number 12 of 2024, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure to support the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Skills and Innovation Project. Statute Instrument number 13 of 2024, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure for Recovery and Resilience Building Policy-Based Loan. Statute Instrument number 14 of 2024, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, Community Tourism Program. Statute Instrument number 18 of 2024, Alien Landholding Licensing Exemption Alert Aviste Order. Statute Instrument number 22 of 2024, Fiscal Incentives Optronics Limited Order. Statute Instrument number 23 of 2024, Value Added Tax Act, the Resolution of Parliament to approve draft Value Added Tax Amendment of Schedule 3 Order. Statute Instrument number 27 of 2024, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule number 1, number 4 Order. Statute Instrument number 29 of 2024, Special Development Areas Amendment of Schedule 1 Order. Statute Instrument number 40 of 2024, Value Added Tax Amendment of Schedule 3 Order.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument number 19 of 2024, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Lucia Business Services Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 20 of 2024, Tourism Incentives, Soufre Hot Wire Rides Inc. Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument number 21 of 2024, Tourism Incentives, St. Lucia Helicopters Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 24 of 2024, Tourism Incentives, Hibiscus Stores St. Lucia Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 25 of 2024, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Kids Club Limited Order. Statutory Instrument number 28 of 2024, Citizenship by Investment Amendment Regulations.
Minister for External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation and Diaspora Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I want to present the following papers standing in my name, statutory instrument number 15 of 2024, civil aviation, units of measurement for air and ground operations regulations, statutory instrument number 16 of 2024, civil aviation air navigation services, fatigue management regulations, statutory instrument number 17 of 2024, civil aviation, certification of air navigation services regulations.
Deputy Prime Minister, present papers standing in the name for the Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to lay the following papers standing in the name of the Minister for Commerce. Statutory Instrument number 9 of 2024, Price Control Amendment number 3 Order. Statutory Instrument number 26 of 2024, Price Control Amendment number 4 Order. Export St. Lucia, Annual Report 2021-2022.
Motions. Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following motion standing in my name, resolution standing in my name, whereas it is provided by Section 63(1)(a) of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 51.01, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for the capital or current expenditure of government. And whereas it is further provided under Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and form part of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow an amount of special joint rights, 30,500,000, the loan, from the International Development Association, the fund, to finance the St. Lucia Sustainable Recovery Development Policy financing. And whereas the service charge is 3/4 of 1% per annum on withdrawn financing balance. And whereas the loan is payable in 40 years, commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. And whereas the loan is repayable in semi-annual installments on the first day of April and first day of October of each year after the grace period. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount of special joint rights, SDRs, 30,500,000, the loan from the International Development Association to finance the St. Lucia Sustainable Recovery Development Policy financing. Be it further resolved that the service charge is 3/4 of 1% per annum on the withdrawn credit balance. The maximum commitment charge is 1/2 of 1% per annum on the withdrawn financing balance. The loan is repayable in 40 years, commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. The loan is repayable in semi-annual installments on the first day of April and first day of October of each year after the grace period. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is seeking approval from the Honorable House to borrow the sum of 30.5 million or US dollars 40 million. Mr. Speaker, one SDR is worth 1.35 million US, Mr. Speaker. So in total, Mr. Speaker, the loan that is being sought from the agency is 108 million EC dollars. Mr. Speaker, I will not be speaking, I will not be saying too much this morning because this loan is a policy-based loan and is meant to finance government's operations in the upcoming budget, the upcoming policy debate, which will happen on the 23rd of April next year. Next month, Mr. Speaker. Again next month, next year. So, Mr. Speaker, the government had to meet certain what we call pillars, so that the agency would be satisfied that St. Lucia met the threshold and the St. Lucian economy could accept or could handle such a loan, Mr. Speaker, albeit the loan is to be paid in 40 years' time, a 10-year grace period, and an interest rate of 0.75%. And Mr. Speaker, in these times of rising interest rates, a 0.75% interest rate is considered very concessionary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, briefly, the loan is going to be used for budgetary support. It's going to finance government's projects in the upcoming budget, Mr. Speaker. And the loan is going to be broken down as follows. Budgetary support, 35 million, and $5 million US to complete the activities under the OECS Regional Tourism Comparative Project. So this development policy law, Mr. Speaker, that's how it's going to be used, part for budgetary support and the other part for the Tourism Competitiveness Project, Mr. Speaker. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I will be speaking a lot more on this loan instrument, but I want to say to you that St. Lucia's debt to GDP ratio is still higher than what you wanted it to be, Mr. Speaker. The ECCB is stating that we have a 60% debt to GDP ratio, and I think our calculations as we speak say we're probably around 70%, Mr. Speaker, but the final figures we're going to head at the policy discussion, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, this is a policy development. It's not the first time we've had a policy-based loan. All governments have taken, the last government did take on a policy-based loan. It's a loan that will help in the financing of the government's budget, but there was one after COVID, and this one is to cushion the effects of the COVID, the problem in Ukraine, the increase in oil prices, and also the increase in interest rates. So you will hear a lot more about how the money be used, but it basically is a budgetary support loan, Mr. Speaker. I urge members to support this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow an amount of special drawing rights, $30,500,000, the loan from the International Development Association to finance the St. Lucia Sustainable Recovery Development Policy Financing. Be it further resolved that A, the service charge is 3/4 of 1% per annum on the withdrawn credit balance. B, the maximum commitment charge is 1/2 of 1% per annum on the unwithdrawn financing balance. C, the loan is repayable in 40 years, commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. D, the loan is repayable in semi-annual installments on the first day of April and the first day of October of each year after the grace period. The member for Sozel Saltibus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must also say that I'm very happy to see you back in your seat, sir. Also, congratulate my colleague from Mikudnov. I will be missing him next to me. I wanted to congratulate my colleague from Mikudnov. You still not there? Can I continue, sir? Being recorded? Okay. I'm speaking as loud as I can in this house. I don't need a mic, you know. I can. Okay. You all thought maybe the leader of the opposition was going to sit here this morning? Mr. Speaker, I only have one question to the to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, with regards to this borrowing. And it is really as a result of a revelation that he made some time ago in the Parliament with regards to a condition of a last loan that we were not privy to prior. So my only question would be, and I'm hoping that he would provide the information in his rebuttal, would be, what are the conditions of this loan? That's really my question to the Honourable Prime Minister this morning. The conditions of the loan.
Mr. Speaker.
The member for Meekwood South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to join my colleague in congratulating both the member from Micoud North in his new ministry, but also want to congratulate, I don't know if it's congratulate as yet or commiserate, with the member from Vieux Fort South as a new Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I become increasingly concerned when we come to the House and the House is either misled because there is a misunderstanding on the other side, or deliberately misled, Mr. Speaker. And I certainly hope that it's not the latter, because I think that it would be a sad state of affairs if we've gotten to, in this country, where a government in office believes that they can come to the House and mislead the House with impunity. And when I heard the member from Castries East, the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance's presentation this morning, I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, that it's the latter. Because we have a press statement that came out from the World Bank as far back as January 11th to be exact, Mr. Speaker, of 2024, announcing that the World Bank's board had approved this policy-based loan for the government of St. Lucia. And Mr. Speaker, it says the COVID-19 pandemic had significant impacts on St. Lucia's economy, leading to a rise in public debt and poverty. In 2020, public debt had reached 94% of the country's gross domestic product, up from 62% in 2019. Despite recent efforts to implement careful financial policies and strengthen public administration, St. Lucia still faces fiscal challenges. And it goes on to say, Mr. Speaker, like many small island states, St. Lucia is also at risk of climate impacts, including a gradual change in rising sea levels and coastal erosion, as well as sudden events like hurricane floods and landslides. These events can be especially harmful to tourism and agriculture, significantly impacting its economy and finances. The country also faces obstacles to private sector growth, including limited access to credit, regulatory bottlenecks, insufficient public infrastructure, and high electricity costs. Now, Mr. Speaker, I come to the most important part, because it seems that, I can't speak for him, but the member from Castries East, after giving such an elaborate, detailed, and accurate one, may I add, Mr. Speaker, of the conditions that were put in place for the CDB loan, where it became now obvious to all of us that the fact is that the government had actually agreed to implementing the 2.5% tax or levy, not for security and health, Mr. Speaker, as promoted, but in fact, it was to raise monies to support the loan that they got. And I see the member is now going in the opposite direction and seems to want to hold back on the real conditions. So the press statement says, Mr. Speaker, to help St. Lucia tackle these challenges, the project will have two main pillars. The first pillar supports St. Lucia's reforms towards fiscal sustainability, increasing revenue and transparency, and managing resources more efficiently. This includes assistance of the implementation of a new fiscal policies announced by the government, such as the introduction of a health and citizens security levy and raising taxes on cigarettes. Here we go again. So some of the same conditions, Mr. Speaker, that we heard from the CDB loan actually are also applicable to this loan, which the member from Castries East voided in saying. It went on, Mr. Speaker. So we now know that one of the conditions to this loan, Mr. Speaker, was the implementation of the levy and also other fiscal reforms, Mr. Speaker, of which the member from Castries East has yet to elucidate us on, has left it again for us to, that's becoming the common word now with this government, Mr. Speaker, speculation. When they leave it to speculation. And when they leave it to speculation, then they turn around, Mr. Speaker, and want to accuse people of misinformation. If you don't want the misinformation to be out there in the first place, do not leave things to speculation, especially with your track record. It goes on, Mr. Speaker, and it says, second pillar will support efforts in climate change and mitigation and adaptation by helping the government implement the National Energy Policy Climate Change Bill, which aims to speed up the shift in economy with lower carbon emissions by promoting use of renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, where does it speak about tourism enhancement and the other things the member spoke of? So is it that the minister did not know? Because we've heard that before. We've heard the minister make many enunciations of things that he did not know. And we would have assumed that he would have known given his track record in government. But this continual breach in the trust of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, and this continual abuse of this parliament from members on the other side who have access to the information and ought to be providing us with an accurate account of what is transpiring, continues to run afoul, Mr. Speaker. We just had it. What the member said to introduce this bill and the assumptions behind the bill are far cry from what this press statement said. So I'm continued shocked, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Mico South, you keep making reference to a CDB press release or World Bank. But this is, we are discussing a loan from the International Development Association.
World Bank, Mr. Speaker.
So, member, so I'm trying to make the connection between the World Bank statement and the motion we are debating. So I've given you some latitude, but you need to bring it back to the motion.
Mr. Speaker, if in fact you've been giving me latitude, I greatly appreciate it. But the fact is they're one and the same. The loan that we're here today is a World Bank loan. It's a drawdown on our SDR rights. This is the same, this is the press statement that came out, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry I don't have it in hard copy, but I'll be happy to make it a copy of the House. Right? That came out just before the announcement. So, Mr. Speaker, it's one and the same. There's nothing to be confused about. This is the World Bank loan.
But remember, you began by speaking to the Castries East MP misleading the House in his opening statement.
Yes, sir.
But you have not spoken to that misleading aspect of. But please.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful if in fact I did not make myself clear. And so give me the latitude to reiterate my position. The member from Castries East spoke about two pillars of this loan, Mr. Speaker. And neither of those pillars are the pillars that are referenced in this document, this press statement. So in fact, it would have appeared, and that's why I brought the CDB loan, that the same conditions that existed for the CDB loan are in fact the same conditions that existed for the World Bank loan. Now, how would I even be able to pick that up? Because, Mr. Speaker, I was a former Minister of Finance. And when we negotiated with CDB, and we negotiated with the World Bank, and we negotiated with the IMF, they all speak. So the fact is that this loan is a continuation of the policy-based loan from CDB, and is the same policy-based loan from the World Bank. And what I'm speaking of is that the member stood there, Mr. Speaker, this morning and misled this House in believing that the pillars and that this loan was going to be used for some tourism project, where it makes no reference to that, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it speaks to the same conditions that existed for the CDB loan. I'm glad that members on the opposite side think it's a laughing matter, because it seems to be a recurring decimal that this government believes that they have the authority to say and do whatever they want to do. And we don't want to appreciate that at the end of the day, they are accountable to the rule of law of this country. And you can run and hide, but you cannot deny that that is a fact. This is a sacred house, Mr. Speaker. This is the ultimate house of which we must all respect and come to this house and speak the truth. It cannot be just allegations of not speaking truth. And here it is, Mr. Speaker, that we sat here this morning and we heard the member from Castries East deliberately, I have to assume deliberately, Mr. Speaker, because I cannot imagine that a person in his position could have gotten it so wrong. How can it be that the World Bank, in a press statement on January 11th, clearly articulated what the conditions to the loans are? And that is not the same thing that the member spoke of. And then the member did exactly what he normally does, Mr. Speaker, and that's how I find myself running afoul. He never wants to speak to the details of anything and is always telling you either at the next meeting or one of his ministers are going to tell you. So here it is now that we're being told, Mr. Speaker, okay, that we have a budget process coming through, and this is money that's going to be spent next year, and we're going to hear details about it. You are coming to the House to seek the Parliament's approval to expend the money. You are expected to provide those details. It's not for the opposition to provide those details. It is for the opposition to hold the government accountable and to ask those tough questions. And I'm hoping that in his response, Mr. Speaker, that the member from Castries East will clarify. Now, Mr. Speaker, on another matter, finally, Mr. Speaker, finally, something that has become habit in St. Lucia, that we obtain an Article 4 report. I don't know why this Article 4 report was delayed and only just came out. But I'm grateful that it has come out, because again, it speaks to some misconceptions that the member from Castries East spoke of, Mr. Speaker. The member from Castries East said that the debt, don't mind that we've borrowed over 700 million. No, he didn't use, I'm using the number 700 million in the last year and a half. That the debt to GDP is under control. 70% or less. That's what the member said, Mr. Speaker. Here it is, though. In the Article 4 report, it says, paragraph 3, Mr. Speaker. Very happy to make this.
Mr. Speaker.
There are several Article 4 consultations. I'm not too sure which specific one that the member is referring to specifically now. Which year are you referring to?
2023.
I didn't hear you say it very well.
2023. It just came out. Well, normally it would come out, as you know, earlier in the year. Excuse me? No. You see, and again, I'm so happy that the member from Ancillary Canneries brought up these, because these are important things for the public to really know and appreciate. An Article 4 statement is an audit that is done by the IMF on an annual basis, Mr. Speaker. And the government can decide whether they want the IMF to publish the report or not. But yes, but I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that when a government does not allow the Article 4 report to be published, it actually generates substantially more questions and suspicion among people. So this Article 4 report was late in coming out, Mr. Speaker. But anyway, I'm happy. It's March 7th it came out. March 7th, 2024. And it says,
allow the member from Mico South to proceed with his contribution uninterrupted. Member of Castries Central.
Mr. Speaker, whilst we take your advice in good stead, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes you listen, and you know, when you permit members, you give members the latitude for the leader of the opposition to stand in this august chamber and to assert that government can prevent the IMF from publishing a report. It's not only erroneous, you know.
And by you raising a point of order.
Well, that's the point of order. He's misleading not only the House, the population of this country. How can you say that government can stop IMF from publishing a report when IMF has its own website and you can go there and print whatever you want? I mean, that is ridiculous coming from an ex-prime minister.
You have made your point. The adjectives are not necessary.
I know they are not, but sometimes you really have to pound them if the head is hard, Mr. Speaker.
Not in this House.
Sorry.
And for the record, the only person who gives the latitude is the presiding officer.
I don't give attitudes, Mr. Speaker.
No, latitude.
Latitude. Oh, latitude.
The presiding officer, not other members. Member for Mico South, objection has been taken to your statement that a government can in fact prevent the IMF from printing an Article 4 report. Would you care to comment on that before you proceed?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very aware of the minister's inexperience in governance, and certainly that he is absolutely wrong. In fact, it is absolutely correct, Mr. Speaker, that the IMF Article 4 report is always published at the consent of the state. If the state disagrees with the report, Mr. Speaker, the state can ask the IMF not to publish the report, Mr. Speaker. So let me proceed, Mr. Speaker. This is published on March 7th, Mr. Speaker. It says, on current policies, public debt is projected to stabilize around 75% of GDP in the medium term, significantly above the regional ceiling of 60% of GDP of 2035. Bank credit to the private sector is projected to remain anemic in the absence of improved loan loss provision, fiscal adjustment, and additional legislative reform. Natural disasters are a recurrent threat, risk to outlook and title to the downward, and includes global economic slowdown. So, Mr. Speaker, here's a dilemma that all countries face, Mr. Speaker. The fundamentals of economic management of a state. There are fundamentally three things a Minister of Finance, among others, but three primary things that the Minister of Finance must be focused on. One, Mr. Speaker, is that his economic growth rate remains higher than the growth rate of debt. Okay? So when your debt rises faster than what your economic growth rate is, ultimately that is going to lead you now to a problem. Meaning you're going to get to a problem where you're actually going to be having more debt than you have revenue. Okay? The second thing is, and it's not a new phenomena, but it's current in the context of today, Mr. Speaker, and that's inflation. So when your economic growth rate is below your debt growth and below your inflationary rate, these indicate that you are heading in the wrong track. And if you allow those things to persist, we're going to find ourselves in a position where the only thing that the government can depend upon is getting policy-based loans in order to be able to resolve the issues. So, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that we can see by layman terms that this government has now made it a habit to borrow. Every time we come to the House, it's a new set of borrowing. We've seen that they have, in less than 1 year, borrowed more money than we had to borrow for the pandemic. And there's no pandemic. In fact, this government boasts about, and I want to use the word very carefully, Mr. Speaker, very carefully, the recovery. Because as we speak now, Mr. Speaker, there really has been no growth. What we've had is a recovery. When your GDP contracted by 24%, you only have one way to go. That's up. You all have not gotten back, not from a tourism perspective, not from an economic perspective, back to where we were in 2019. And in fact, when you take into consideration inflation, Mr. Speaker, we're slightly less. So we have not even fully recovered. You can't even begin to talk about growth yet. And it's obvious, Mr. Speaker, by listening to the members on the opposite side and looking at the policies that are coming out and the level of borrowing, we're in trouble, Mr. Speaker. So when you take HIA Airport, Mr. Speaker, who is going to pay for the cost overruns? St. Jude's, who is going to pay for the cost overruns? Millennium Highway and West Coast Road, who is going to pay for those cost overruns? The Rodney Bay Road, the member of housing and his complete, utter irresponsible act as it pertains to the Shock and Tavern housing developments. Who is going to pay for those inefficiencies? When we give away land in St. Lucia at under the market price, Mr. Speaker, when we give away $400 million of revenue and we get very little in return, where is the investment that's going to take place, Mr. Speaker, to improve the capacity? Instead, we see that this government apparently intent on simply generating easy money. The easy money, Mr. Speaker, is to tax people. Taking money from people's pockets. So when the members on the opposite side, Mr. Speaker, want to boast that they've collected already $10 million and are going to collect $44 million, where does that money come from, Mr. Speaker? That money comes from people's pockets. That's less money for people to spend. And now what you're saying to those people is that you have to trust the government that they're going to spend that money more efficiently than you. And we can't even see where the money is going. This is the same government that said you can't eat roads. Where's the economic? This is the same government that said that foreign direct investment must demonize. We don't want white people in our country. And today now, they have to now take a reverse track because they've now recognized that those words are coming back to haunt them. And the same things that they criticized the former government on in wanting to grow the economy and to balancing our accounts, meaning we wanted to make sure the economy was always growing faster than the debt. We want to make sure now that we control inflation. It is a disaster, Mr. Speaker. It's a calamity, Mr. Speaker. When a government would have not addressed the inflationary problems in this country and would have deliberately adopted policies to allow bus fares, and now I hear persons wanting to make a comparison. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker? When I can make a comparison between beer and water. I want to increase the price of water. They want to increase the price of water. In this environment that we're in right now, Mr. Speaker, after bus fares have gone up, electricity has gone up, bread has gone up, food prices throughout this country have gone up, and the government now is taking even more money away from the people by taxing them. So, Mr. Speaker, the member from Castries East presentation, the member from Castries East presentation, Mr. Speaker, okay, brings more questions, and I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, of this continual habit of misleading this House, and where a government is to provide actual information, that there seems to be a deliberate attempt to suppress that information. We are here to approve this bill, and I do not believe, Mr. Speaker, that the member from Castries East in his presentation has provided this House with all of the information and to the conditions of this loan that are necessary to get the support of the opposition. And I dare say that hopefully the public who is listening to this, who've already seen that the government breached their trust by telling them to make sacrifices for the tax on health and safety, to find out that that money was never intended for that use. That money was intended to get support for both the CDB loan and the World Bank loan. And that is what is taking place in this country. And I'm even more concerned, and I'm saying I'm looking forward to the estimates and the appropriations bill, to see the numbers, because we've been left in the dark, Mr. Speaker. I see that even the IMF, Mr. Speaker, even the IMF on their report showed unemployment blank Even they have concerns, must have concerns with the formula that the government is using because they've left it blank. The IMF, and that's as of March 7th. So don't try to make it out to believe that the opposition is playing politics. We're simply asking the questions and providing the information, and I think that we are deserving of the accurate answer of what's taking place, and not the BPWI. Why is it the IMF has not put the unemployment numbers? See, that's a typical thing, Mr. Speaker. Ask the IMF. Really? They're here representing the people of St. Lucia. You are accountable to the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Not about MAPWI, about calling people names. It's simply asking that the information that's provided to this House is accurate, and that to give the public of this country the satisfaction, Mr. Speaker, that the affairs of this government of the people, of the country, are being run fairly, justly, and that we can trust the information that we're obtaining. And I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, there is time for this government to correct their ways and to make sure that when they come to this House, that they bring accurate information. And if it is uncomfortable, it is to explain to the people why you have to make those decisions. You're not accounting to me, Mr. Speaker. That's not, I only represent the thousands of people in opposition. And my office continues to offer a platform to all of those people, Mr. Speaker, who have concerns. And therefore, I'm bringing their voices to the table. And I'm saying to this government, we all have to make difficult decisions. Don't be scared of them. Come out and tell the people the truth. But when you come to this House, Mr. Speaker, with half-truths, or in fact, sometimes no truth at all, it starts causing people to reconsider the trust that they've put into you, into this government, and will destroy the democracy that we have, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that the member did not articulate the conditions to this loan. I am concerned that the member has not articulated how this money is going to be spent. Is there a deficit that we don't know about as to why you now have to borrow money for budgetary support? All the indications up until last week, Mr. Speaker, all the indications were unemployment was down at its lowest level, economic growth was booming, okay, revenue is doing well. So why would you have to go and borrow $100 million on budgetary support? I don't understand. And there's another bill that we're going to pass today in which we can ask even greater questions. But my concern, Mr. Speaker, is the amount of borrowing, $200 million from the Saudis, $100 million from CDB, another $100 million from World Bank. We're now going to go and guarantee another $80 million. We have several other loans, over $750 million in borrowing, Mr. Speaker. How can this government say that things are going well? They're acting like if they're drunken sailors, Mr. Speaker, on a spending spree. So they're doing one thing, Mr. Speaker, and their actions and their words are saying something entirely different. And I'm asking the member from Castries, please, when he comes to this House, provide the accurate information to what we're doing, because today he did not do that, and I'm disappointed that he didn't. I'm sure there are a lot more people, Mr. Speaker, who are disappointed in that. Thank you.
Member of Castries Central.
Mr. Speaker, it was, quite honestly, it wasn't my intention to have contributed to this discourse, given the fact, Mr. Speaker, that, take your ball and run, that this is a situation of normalcy. You see, Mr. Speaker, what the former administration used to do was to combine the borrowing for budgetary support in the very proceedings of the appropriation bill. Right now, it is done separately, so we deal with the budgetary support before we come to the appropriation bill. Now, Mr. Speaker, you sit here, you listen, and I must tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I support the motion. You sit here and you listen to the former Prime Minister, and you'd want to tell yourself that he ought to know better, Mr. Speaker. Because as long as your recurrent revenue is not excessive to facilitate the implementation of capital projects, you must borrow to do your capital projects. And essentially this is what is going on now. It just precedes the appropriation bill. But I'm listening, Mr. Speaker, to the member for Mico South, and he has the audacity to speak about giving land away. He has the audacity to speak about spending wisely. And I have no difficulty with that, because this is good economic advice geared towards the benefit of the country. But then if you give advice and you sway, or your actions are diametrically opposed to your own advice, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what exactly you're saying or doing. And I want to talk about the land and the proper spending. Because, Mr. Speaker, the government had an asset on which it had spent over $52 million on. The Dahem Hall, I speak of no other. The government had spent $52 million on the Dahem Hall. When this member from Mico South as Prime Minister sold it, we had spent 52. It was valued at 60. He sold it for $13.5 million. Less than a quarter of the value. Let me say it again. The Dahem Mall, and he speak, Mr. Speaker, I refer to the mall because the law says whatever permanent structure is on the land is deemed to be part of the land. So when you speak of land, you speak of the land itself and the permanent structure. So it qualifies as land. The Dahem Mall was valued at $60 million. He literally gave it away. Government had spent over $52 million on it. So we had some kind of equity in terms of value versus what we had actually spent. He gave it away for less than a quarter, for $13.5 million. Today has the audacity to talk about spending money wisely. And what is worse, Mr. Speaker, having given it away, he imposed a liability of longevity on the people of this country. He turned back and rented for over $1 million a month for 16.5 years, totaling almost $200 million. That's right. You took the asset. It was valued $60 million. You sold it for 13.5, and on top of that, you caused us to be contractually obligated to rent the same building for 16.5 years at over $1 million a month, totaling over $200 million. And you have the audacity to talk about wise spending. We have the Cabot lands, Mr. Speaker. NIC were in the preparatory stages of buying the land for the people of this country. What did you do? You flew some of your surrogates to Canada, prevented NIC from buying the land, and advised NIC to lend the people, the pensioners, money. Cabot land at the time was valued at $90 million. Cabot got it at 1/3 of the price of $30 million. And having sold 1 or 2 lots, I could tell you they paid off NIC. You know, and you have the audacity. Not only did you prevent a St. Lucian from owning a slice of St. Lucia, not only did you do that, you use our pensioners' money. People who have contributed to the development of this country use their sweat to enrich a foreigner. Yes, sir. You know, you have the audacity to speak about spending money wisely. DSH, giving away land. DSH, Mr. Speaker, 1,000 acres. And I'm so sorry that a man who's renowned or who is an expert insofar as banking is concerned could have fixed his signature to such an egregious deed, something that is against the interest of the people of this country. I speak of the member for Swazel. He has asked me to give him a break, so I'll pacify it. But Mr. Speaker, you have the audacity to talk about giving away land, 1,000 acres at $1 an acre for 99 years. Jesus. You know? Then the man say bring in race. And he don't let the man talk about spending money. The man took everybody, all ministers were chauffeur driven. Horses, walking on red carpet, using taxpayers' money for horse race. Today you speak about spending money wisely. Mr. Speaker, when the last government won the elections on June 6, 2016, every minister had a room where? In that hotel in Viewfort, Coconut Bay, you know, Coconut Bay.
The member for Swazel, Saltibus.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. The member has been misleading the House on the past 4 points that he has made there. But what really got me annoyed, you know, because sometimes you let people hang themselves, Mr. Speaker. But when he comes now to speak about everybody had a room at Coconut Bay, Mr. Speaker, this is grossly false, and the member needs to take this statement back.
Mr. Speaker, I can speak from a standpoint of certainty. If the member did not capitalize on the then Prime Minister's generosity, that is his business. But I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, a room was made available for every minister in his cabinet. And I stand by this, because I'm sure the member for Castries North never capitalized on it, but he had a room there as well. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, when they talk about misleading the House, and those are the very people that talk about spending money wisely. Those are the very people that talk about spending money wisely. Mr. Speaker, there was a minister in his cabinet that got land at 69 cents a square foot. The cabinet conclusion is there for all and sundry to see, and then you talk about giving away land. There was a chairman of NHC who got land in Marigo at less than $2 a square foot, and then you talk about giving away property. I mean, Mr. Speaker, those things, honestly, under your watch, you know. And then, Mr. Speaker, spend money efficiently. You are Prime Minister, a country that went through, it's nobody's fault that COVID hit us, and we did not stand in isolation from the ramifications of COVID, but with resilience we had to face COVID. But in that kind of environment, you go and rent a hotel room for $8,000 a night, £2,000 a night, and then you talk about spending money wisely. Mr. Speaker, it is only now the leader of the opposition does not leave his vehicle on from morning till night. Only now, because he doesn't have access to state funds. I can tell you without fear of contradiction, Mr. Speaker, that any time the last Prime Minister left his house at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the first thing is you would know, because siren meow, 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 every day. And then you can follow that vehicle, Mr. Speaker, and I would bet my life that as long as he's not back home, wherever that vehicle is, it's idling with the AC on. And you talk about spending people's money wisely, Mr. Speaker. You spend $112 million on horses. They came by air-conditioned plane, Lord have mercy, on taxpayers' backs, and then had to sell the horses to Barbados. Point. And you talk about spending money wisely, Mr. Speaker. You gave your brother-in-law $7.3 million to go and secure vaccines for us. Up to now, we have been refunded partially. We have not received all the monies. And then came and lied to St. Lucians, talking about it was a collaborative effort with Barbados. Belgians say, we never pay any money. And then you are talking about spending money wisely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, $11 million for a bypass road for Tioa King. $12 million to buy alternative land for the farmers. $15 million. Yeah, he was Minister of Infrastructure. I stand corrected. Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is this. We are confronted with a motion to give us the relevant budgetary support so that when we come on the 26th, it's smooth sailing. So really and truly, we are in the preparatory stages of our budget presentation. Yeah, £2,000 a night. And on top of that hotel room, Mr. Speaker, I saw certain names. Laundry. Even laundry, the people charge the taxpayers to do, And not here alone, and the entourage. Laundry. Yo pate sa même lave on had your I'm certainly pay puli. And then you come and talk about, it's just that kind of irresponsible statement, Mr. Speaker. Then he talk about the levy. A character like that, I don't know what he does in this August chamber, You'll embase this government, saying this 2.5% is this is so that. It's not for health and security levy. But you go to Trinidad and you're telling them impose a levy for security. Kalteba, guys. Kalteba. The man is here. The man was blowing hot flames because the government found it fitting to generate revenue, particularly to address our acute crime situation and to take care of our people. He made a lot of noise, but he goes to Trinidad on taxpayers' money. He went there on taxpayers' money, but took a political platform, almost attempting to fake a cry. And she's so visionary. Almost attempting to fake a cry, advising the leader of the opposition to impose a tax for security, which is the same thing. We are in an advanced stage, and he has lambasted us to that. So, Mr. Speaker, I say all of this so that the people of this country and those in the diaspora following the proceedings will know that when this man speaks on the left side of his mouth, they must watch the right side. And there was this old saying that in a certain brain, on the right side, there is nothing left, and on the left side, there is nothing right. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion wholeheartedly. I thank you.
Member for Islay Canary.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Miku South was given the impression that the government of St. Lucia, under the leadership of the member for Castries East, was, for whatever reason, delayed in authorizing the IMF to release a report. But a little quick search of the exact thing he was reading would say on the August 25th, 2023, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund concluded the 2023 Article 4 consultation. August 2023. But he comes and he says March the 7th. Obviously, it'll say March the 7th because they've just essentially reissued the statement that the board made. It says it very clear, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, what's even more worrying is this is the second time we're going to have to apologize to the international financial institutions based on misinformation coming out of the member from Miku South. He's insulted the IFC before, and we had to apologize on his behalf. He's now going ahead and saying that the IMF is waiting for instructions from government to release information. They provide you the funding, Mr. Speaker. They don't need your consent to release the information. What they may ask you to clarify is certain data points, not whether or not they could release the information. On the other point with regards to the health and safety, health and security level, Mr. Speaker, we've made it very clear if we want better health outcomes for our citizens, the figure is 6% of GDP is what we need to get to. We are slowly climbing to that figure. So it's not simply about satisfying the requirements for a policy-based loan, which, Mr. Speaker, his signature is on the document. The policy-based loan he's referring to and demonizing, he was the one who signed it in 2020.
That's true. No.
He was the one who signed it.
No.
I kid you not, Senior Minister. He signed the policy-based loan in 2020. He was the one who signed it.
Oh my God.
But he stands there. But Mr. Speaker, I am new to politics.
No, I am new. He said I'm inexperienced.
And I always had the impression that honorable people put themselves up for politics and for election. But for the United Workers' Party, whether it is the leader of the opposition, the member of Mickle South, or the defeated candidate in Ansari Canris, they have this, Mr. Speaker, this mission of spreading misinformation. But the right time will come, Mr. Speaker, where we'll be able to ask them the very same questions that they're asking us there, but it'll be in a different forum. Mr. Speaker, we've done everything we can based on what we inherited from the last administration. We, Mr. Speaker, and I say we, have worked very hard to correct the wrongs of the last administration. When we got into government, Mr. Speaker, the debt to GDP ratio as of December 2021 was in excess of 100%. Excess of 100%. 2.5 years later, the new Minister of Finance has tried his best to put this country on a sustainable path, and all you could do is ridicule it. Mr. Speaker, this is a very dangerous precedent, not for us in here who are educated and knowledgeable, but the average man on the street. We are destroying the very thing, Mr. Speaker, that we are trying to develop. I would like to caution the member from Mickle South. If he wants to rule over a country, he needs to rule over a country that is functioning. If he continues on the trajectory he's going, there will be nothing for him to rule over. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Library.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of the resolution proposed by the Minister for Finance to borrow an amount of special drawing rights, 30.5 million, approximately 40 million US dollars from the International Development Association, better known as the World Bank, to finance the St. Lucia Sustainable Recovery Development Policy financing. Mr. Speaker, I did not come to this house to gallery today. I believe it is proper that this government concentrate its efforts on bringing back this country to fiscal sanity. And this is exactly what we are doing. The purpose of this loan, Mr. Speaker, is to support the recovery of St. Lucia toward a sustainable and resilient economy through two complementary, of course, strategies. Undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, I was surprised when the leader of the opposition took the floor to accuse this government of A, B, and C. When prior to COVID, when the world economy was booming, he plunged St. Lucia into a recession. Negative growth in 2019. And obviously, our ability to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Member for Mickle South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the point of order, the member is misleading the House. The member continues to make the statement that we plunged the country in 2019 into a recession. A recession is when you have 3 consecutive quarters of negative growth. We simply had a 0.01% of negative growth that year, Mr. Speaker. That is not a recession by any means.
Please proceed, member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government has embarked on a major reform program aimed at improving the economic, social, and environmental sustainability of this country. These actions taken by our government in strengthening the fiscal performance of government, stimulating private sector development, and transitioning to a green economy have been identified as prior actions for this loan provided by the World Bank. This clearly shows, Mr. Speaker, that the World Bank is very impressed with St. Lucia's current economic performance and the reforms that it is introducing to build sustainability and resilience in the economy. I will now briefly summarize those actions, Mr. Speaker. The central focus today of this borrowing, one is the strengthening of fiscal sustainability and responsibility, as well as supporting the new public financial management regulations, public procurement regulations, and the promulgation of the new public debt management. Mr. Speaker, that's what this thing is all about, not about the roro and the drama. We are here to introduce some reforms that will put the economy on a solid footing so we can deliver more to the people of this country, to address the legitimate and pressing problems of our small, open, and vulnerable economy. Mr. Speaker, it is well known that a robust fiscal framework is critical for safeguarding fiscal sustainability and reducing the country's vulnerability to external shocks, natural disasters, and climate change. What's in that you cannot understand? Mr. Speaker, our development has been severely affected by the lack of fiscal space to enable us to finance important productive investments to generate economic growth and development, to boost employment, reduce poverty, and improve the standard of living. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, our government has taken significant action to expand the fiscal space. This borrowing supports the promotion of green and resilient private sector growth by supporting climate change mitigation and adaptation, as well as reforms to improve the business environment. This is what today is all about. Not roro, not mapwe, not unnecessary debate. It seeks to enhance access to finance through the insolvency bill, which is on the order paper today, for consideration and security interest in Movable Property Act. Another action identified is the National Energy Policy, which is expected to facilitate the transition to a low-carbon economy by fostering the development of renewable energy sources, reducing energy imports and costs, and improving climate change adaptation. This is what today is all about, Mr. Speaker. This borrowing will give effect and support the Climate Change Act, which was recently passed by this Honorable House. This act, Mr. Speaker, codifies an overarching legal framework to address the impacts of climate change and embeds related considerations, including those related to mitigation, into existing and new sectoral laws with strong emphasis, Mr. Speaker, on private sector engagement. That is the way a responsible and prudent government develops a country. All those things, Mr. Speaker, I am saying, are well documented, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated, Mr. Speaker, many of these actions have been pursued by the government. And in the space of just over 2.5 years, our government has introduced significant reform measures aimed at developing a robust and resilient economy. This is well established. in the literature, in the public domain. Mr. Speaker, over the last 2 fiscal years, our government has made significant progress in improving the economic and fiscal performance of St. Lucia. Indeed, under the astute leadership of the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, St. Lucia experienced a remarkable economic recovery, registering economic growth rates of 12.2% and 18.1% in 2021 and 2022 respectively, after recording a slump of 25.4% in 2020. Mr. Speaker, again, those things are well established in the public domain. That's information that is out there, Mr. Speaker. Our economic performance in 2021 and 2022 was the best in the ECCU region. And of course, apart from Guyana, that has oil. And I said during last year's debate that if we had coconut oil, we'll grow even faster than Guyana. And of course, among the best growth rates in the world. The impressive economic performance has also been reflected in an improvement in our fiscal health, as the fiscal deficit and public debt to GDP has been significantly reduced. Again, well established in the literature, well established in the public domain. I'm not making it up, Mr. Speaker. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I wish to draw attention to our economic and social review, captioned Summary of Central Government Fiscal Operations as a percentage of GDP. The primary deficit, which was 0.4% in 2019-2020, and then widened considerably to a deficit of 8.2% in 2020-2021, was reduced considerably, Mr. Speaker, to 2.2% in 2021-2022. Again, it is well documented. The fiscal turnaround was complete, Mr. Speaker, in 2022-2023 with a primary surplus of 1.2% being recorded. The public debt as a percentage of GDP has also been reduced from a high of 98.1% in 2020 to 69% in 2022. Again, Mr. Speaker, well documented in the literature. Notwithstanding the significant achievements by our government in the last 2.5 years, Mr. Speaker, we all know that St. Lucia faces unique development challenges as a small island developing state. We are very small with limited resources, including land and labor. This, Mr. Speaker, limits our scope to diversify the economy. Again, Mr. Speaker, you look at IMF publications and other publications, that's well recorded in those documents, Mr. Speaker. The St. Lucia economy is highly dependent on the tourism sector, making it highly vulnerable to external shocks that impact our major tourist markets, notably the United States and the United Kingdom. Again, Mr. Speaker, I do not have to invent those things. They are well documented. Climate change also presents a major threat to our economy, both in the short term, through more intense storms, floods, droughts, and landslides, and in the long term, through hazards associated with sea level rise and the increase in temperature. Mr. Speaker, well established. You go to the IMF or World Bank websites and you will search the major issues impacting us, and they are well recorded. Climate change is not only a major threat to tourism, but it also poses a major threat to the agricultural sector, including fisheries sector, which is an important source of food and income, especially for our fisher folk. So among the most vulnerable in our society, Mr. Speaker, among the most vulnerable, and therefore we must address the dislocation of the entire fabric of the St. Lucian economy to be able to deliver to the most vulnerable, as we have been doing, Mr. Speaker. These bottlenecks include, and before I address that, I must say another major challenge we face are the structural bottlenecks, which are major constraints to economic diversification and growth. You have heard economists debating all the time, and every workshop you go to, you hear people talking about let's diversify the economy. but to diversify into what? But at some point, we must bite the bullet and decide how we are going to restructure the economy of this country in terms of the structural changes we must make to ensure we develop a different model so we can deliver sustained benefits to the people that we serve and the people that we represent. These bottlenecks include low credit availability, the lack of regulatory framework to resolve insolvency and register property, inadequate public infrastructure. Again, Mr. Speaker, all of those things are well recorded. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, these bottlenecks have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has resulted in high interest rates, high inflation rates, and of course we have a new conflict in the Middle East, and in an evolving morbid scenario that we do not know what is going to happen. Our government, led by the Honorable Member for Castries East, has taken action to confront the structural rigidities head on, with many of these actions being identified in this loan as prior actions. Again, if you go and you read the document associated with this borrowing, you are going to see all of those things articulated in terms of prior actions. These prior actions identified, Mr. Speaker. I will highlight briefly the prior actions and how they intend to benefit and improve St. Lucia's economic performance. A number of prior actions have been undertaken which seeks to strengthen fiscal sustainability and accountability. One of the measures taken by the government was to strengthen revenue enhancement to reduce the fiscal deficit by introducing the health and security levy and the excise tax on cigarettes. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition alluded to it earlier. But when you are responding to economic challenges and you put a levy in place to deal with security and health, it is part of a holistic approach to responding to the challenges that we confront. This will allow the government to increase the fiscal space and undertake critical investment in health and security. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the ongoing construction works being undertaken at St. Jude and the construction of the new Grosile police station, as well as the refurbishment of other police stations, including the Viewfort police station. That is what we are doing with the security levy. This is what we're doing with the health levy. Mr. Speaker, we have over the years underfunded the health and security sectors. Well established again. Our government has taken the bold step of introducing revenue measures to fund these critical sectors in the interest of improving our crime and security strategies and providing better health care to the citizens of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, there are times members opposite will cry about the most vulnerable, as if he is a new man that just appeared for the first time in this parliament as leader of the opposition, and he was not the one denying them income support during COVID. He pretends as if he is not the one who took away the laptops from the people of this country. He pretends as if he has all the answers to all the problems that we have. Fei J with tooth. Mr. Speaker, when we come to this house, we expect people to be cerebral about the engagement. And I have so far gone through a lot of information that is in the public domain, just bringing it together, Mr. Speaker, to make the central point. We ensure that we did this in a fiscally responsible way by not increasing the fiscal deficit and the public debt of the country. We also wanted to minimize the impact on the people of St. Lucia by exempting a number of goods and services from the health and security levy. When the member for Viewfort South introduced VAT, over 100 items were zero rated or exempted to protect the most vulnerable. And the debate on VAT or the health and security levy has nothing to do with the most vulnerable, but they engage in political mischief. Prior action 2 was approved by Parliament recently, namely the enactment of the Public Debt Management Act, Mr. Speaker. The Act specifies the purposes for which the executive can borrow. All of this is to increase fiscal prudence in this small and vulnerable economy of ours. It also strengthens the oversight of the executive by requiring annual reporting to Parliament on debt management strategy implementation. The Act also clarifies the process of domestic and external borrowing, issuance of guarantees, and on-lending. It actually attempts to put the nuts and bolts in place to ensure that the government is acting appropriately and prudently, Mr. Speaker. Again, well established. The prior actions are well contained in the World Bank document. Prior action 3 refers to the implementation of the public procurement regulations, which were approved by the Minister of Finance by statutory instrument number 143 of 2023. The public procurement regulations implement the provisions of the Public Procurement Act by providing in-depth requirements on key aspects of transparent, effective, and efficient public procurement. All of those things, Mr. Speaker, are well contained. The regulations provide details of the management of the procurement process. Action 4, the implementation of the Public Finance Management Regulations. The Act establishes clear roles and responsibilities for the Ministry of Finance and gives the Minister of Finance the authority to issue the regulations to enforce compliance. All of those things are well documented. It also aims to enhance resource management efficiency following a natural disaster. To support the implementation of the Act, the accompanying PFM regulations provide detailed guidance on various aspects of accounting, public debt and cash management, treasury management, financial control, and external audit. Again, Mr. Speaker, well documented. Documented. Prior actions 3 and 4 will promote transparency, accountability, and efficiency of the public resource utilization. Well documented. Well documented. What is the debate? What is the dispute? We will hear a loud noise being made by the opposition that we are borrowing more and more. But they will not tell you the reasons for the borrowing. It is clear from what I have said, Mr. Speaker, that the prior actions that we are implementing will help to strengthen the prudent fiscal policy being implemented by this government and provides additional resources to invest in critical areas to support economic growth and poverty reduction in St. Lucia. These actions will allow us to utilize our scarce resources more effectively by providing for best practice financial governance. Well documented. Well documented. We will not do like the previous government and squander our resources on useless projects like the procurement of incinerators, the new road built for DSH, the purchase of vaccines that up to now we have not received, questionable direct awards, and the list goes on and on, Mr. Speaker, wasting the country's money, wasting the country's resources, while the people of this country were sucking salt and they couldn't breathe during COVID because this government refused when they were there. Members opposite refused. You refuse to give the people the income support during COVID. You understand? The people needed income support, and you receive from World Bank, IMF, CDB, the Taiwanese, the resources for income support to them, but you chose to continue on your merry way preparing for elections. But our government has taken steps to reduce the unemployment rate, with a rate falling from 21.7% in 2020 to 16.5% in 2022. Mr. Speaker, the private sector, especially small businesses, are faced with high fuel costs, and limited access to financing. Both factors are critical for starting, operating, and expanding businesses. And this is what this borrowing is all about, in a holistic way. And you can go on the site and get the information. High energy cost and limited financing also exacerbates exposure to climate change and natural disasters. Climate change will continue to require policy changes aimed at reducing reliance on traditional fossil fuel energy sources. Again, Mr. Speaker, well recognized. And I could go on and on talking about the different prior actions that were, of course, necessary for us to get to today's borrowing. But, Mr. Speaker, I will take my brief presentation to its logical conclusion by saying that St. Lucia has made considerable progress in implementing significant reforms in its fiscal architecture and in promoting private sector and green growth. These reforms are required to place the economy on a higher growth trajectory and achieve sustained development. And this is what we are all about. As a small economy, the margin of error is quite limited. And therefore, we need to run a tight economy. I felt today I would pull the various strands and articulate them in this honorable house. And they can go and double check it. I did not invent information, but all the information is there. This loan will provide the government resources to help achieve these objectives. The loan is also on very favorable terms. It is to be repaid over a 40-year period with a 10-year grace period. The service charge is 0.75% on the withdrawn credit balance, and the maximum commitment charge is 0.5% on the withdrawn balance. There are no interest charges on the loan, Mr. Speaker, and I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this is the way that a responsible Minister for Finance and responsible government go about the business of governance. Again, Mr. Speaker, I close by saying they can fact check the information because it's well contained on the various sites. I wish to therefore give my full support to this resolution, Mr. Speaker. I now yield the floor.
Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my preamble, I'll not be long because I will deal with it at the policy debate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but I understand the mental state of the leader of the opposition. I understand it, and I feel, because this morning, after he has publicly ridiculed me for stuttering, he was stuttering this morning.
Mr. Speaker, the member keeps on a point.
Member for Miku South, you don't just put on your light and stand.
I apologize, Mr. Speaker.
Put on your light and I acknowledge you. Please proceed, member for Miku South.
Mr. Speaker, the member is making disparaging remarks about a member. I have never and will never make remarks about him on his stuttering. Okay, we all have our handicaps. Okay, so I would just like to make that a point, Mr. Speaker. There may be other people who have done it. Okay, but I would not do that, Mr. Speaker. And if I stutter, I apologize, and that's part of me being who I am.
Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I will bring the video, the clip for you, Mr. Speaker. He was talking about St. Jude, and I'll tell you what he said. He said, they asked the leader of the opposition, what's the price of St. Jude? And he said, blah, 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 blah. You understand, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, so I sat and I heard him, and I was told not to respond. But I'm not going to respond, I'm just going to say a few things, Mr. Speaker. That's the same leader of the opposition who said, after June the 6th, the opposition lost its right to speak. That's the same leader of the opposition who said to public servants, your job is not to tell government what to do, your job is to do what the government says. That's the same leader of the opposition who stayed in this house and heard a member of his party say to the opposition, "You'll just start to cry. You're crying now. You'll just start to cry," and said nothing. That's the same leader of the opposition who left 6 members in the opposition, and he refused to give them, as my colleague says, not a bag of cement in the CDP program. That's the same leader of the opposition who during COVID, he did not give one member of the opposition not one bag of flour to give the constituents during COVID. That's the same leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker. And you know, and he comes here with piousness. And he thinks, he pretends he was never in government. And he just came down, and these guys are doing so many bad things. They are misleading the people. They're not saying what. That's the same leader of the Mr. Speaker who came to this honorable house and said that there was 150 that would be put in a lockbox to fix roads, Mr. Speaker. I asked him, that's the man who's speaking about deceiving people. That's the guy who's speaking about not speaking the truth to the people. And I ask him every day, where is the lockbox with $1.50? Up to today, he has not responded.
Asking for the 23 islands.
Up to today, Mr. Speaker. That's the same leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, who speaks about taxes. Mr. Speaker, you know, I was told not to respond this morning because I have ample time to respond at the policy basis. But I just want to make a few points because this thing is almost hurtful. When you see a gentleman who professes to have the interests of the country at heart, and he deliberately goes out and maligns the government. He goes out and says to investors whatever he wants. He stands in the house and says things that are obviously not true. Let me tell you a story about taxes, Mr. Speaker. This government has given the most tax amnesties and tax reductions in the history of St. Lucia. And it didn't start with us. It didn't start with my administration. It started from the time the leader, the member for Beaufort South, was in government. We started a process of tax reduction by beginning to reduce the tax threshold. We reduced it. We increased it, in fact, in that the people's income levels, right now it's $18,000. I think when we came it was 30, and the leader and the member for Beaufort South reduced it. Here's what we've done also. We've said to the taxpayers of St. Lucia, both businesses and private people, that any tax that you owe the government, including VAT, Mr. Speaker, is the tax that you collect from people and you ought to give it back to the government. There are some business people who do not pay the government back that tax. So obviously there is a fine and a penalty. We said to them, an interest. Once you pay what you collect, we will waive it and just pay the government what you collected. Just pay what you collected and waive all the penalties and interest. And he is speaking about a government that taxes people. This is the government that has reduced the tax threshold. Reduced it. And he's speaking about a government that taxes people. Mr. Speaker, makes a big fuss. And you know, if you don't listen to it, you will believe it. Oh, 2.5% levy. Mr. Speaker, when you go to borrow from any institution, anybody, including private people, the bank tells you what's your income. The bank tells you what your expense is. The bank tells you, they look at what is called your income vis-a-vis your debt, and they give you what is called a debt ratio. And once that is okay, they give you the loan. He comes, and we know the place talking about 2.5 levy, as if the 2.5 levy was supposed to be put aside, like he said he would put a 1.150 aside, put it in a box, and leave it there and take it when you want. We never said so. We said the 2.5% levy would be put in the consolidated fund, and it will be used for health and security. And you talk about misleading people? You talking about misleading people, Mr. Speaker? So it makes the point, we took a prior pot, the loan from the World Bank was, part of the conditions was to put the health and security levy. Part of the conditions was to increase revenue, and we choose, and made it publicly, made it clear to the public that we'd put a 2.5% levy on all goods except food, etc. But here's what he's saying. He's not saying we remove VAT on building materials. We remove VAT on medical equipment. And recently, we remove VAT on all sporting gear for the sports people of this country. So he comes and he talks about taxes. I want to ask the leader of the opposition, what tax has this government put on the people of St. Lucia except the 2.5% levy? What tax has this government put on the people of St. Lucia apart from the 2.5% levy, and what taxes we have reduced? Mais vle mande, Master Sisa Koponza, qui taxe nous jamais été à sous Jean Sainte-Lucie si pas 2.5% levy, et comment taxe nous a tiré? You see, Mr. Speaker, when they peddle that misinformation and believe because they can say it and get some surrogates to promote it, Mr. Speaker, that's the truth. But I've said in this honorable house that right now, in the season that we are in, we are going to rebut all the lies and all the misinformation. And I know my colleague told me not to speak, but I have to speak. Because, you know, when you allow these things to filter down the road, people believe it. People believe it, Mr. Speaker. When you tell people that the government is taxing, what tax have you put on the public of St. Lucia? What extra tax? The 150, you put it. What extra tax have we put on the people of St. Lucia? And what benefits have the people of St. Lucia got since you are in government? What benefits? And what taxes did we put? I stand don't worry about it. You understand? So it's time to speak. No. When is him? Global pressures, COVID-19. When is us? Nothing. When is them? Pressures of the outside. This and that. When it's us? No. Bring down inflation, reduce inflation. Mr. Speaker, this leader of the opposition, if he wants to speak the truth, must tell the world what is global inflation when he was in government and what is global inflation now or last year. Tell the world. Tell the world what was global economic growth when you were there and what is global economic growth now. Tell the world, before COVID, which economy had the greatest dip, the sixth greatest drop in the world, and the entire world had COVID. Tell the public that. Tell the public. Tell the public, Mr. Speaker. Tell the public. Because, you know, you open that door, you open it, and you believe you can say it in your normal style or go and cry and say, look at what they're doing me. Let the opposition speak. You are the one, Mr. Speaker, who put barriers outside the parliament to prevent people from coming to the parliament. You are the one who removed the loudspeakers from out there for people not to hear the proceedings of parliament. You see, your history will haunt you. Your history, because you know, you've tried to change so many times. You're the one who said and you promoted the most disgusting thing about people and their families, and you said nothing about it. Your history. So don't matter how you hide. Anytime you accuse anybody of something, we can show a tape where you or member of your party said worse or did worse. Anytime. I challenge you. Anything you say, I can challenge you where you said worse or you did worse. Your history is following, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, he says that I misled the House when I spoke about the use of the DPC loan. As if it's the first time. As if it's the first time the country has had a DPC loan. First time. Here's what I did. I did not hide the DPC loan in the provision bill. I came up front and I said, this is going to be used for budgetary support. What is budgetary support? Budgetary support is helping in climate change. Budgetary support is, you know, all these kind of things, because all government expenditure is encompassed in a budget. So what's the point? What is the point? And he says, I said, I misled the public because I said that the loan was used for tourism. That's what I said. I said, Mr. Speaker, budgetary support of SDR 26.7 million or US dollars 35 million, and number two, SDR 3.8 million or US dollars 5 million allocated to complete activities under the OECS Regional Tourism Competitiveness Project. That's what I said. What is misleading in that? Isn't the tourism competitiveness project part of the enhancement of the economy of St. Lucia? What's so misleading? What's so grievous in that? Now, he says that I didn't tell the public that the health and security levy was a part of a condition of the loan. Mr. Speaker, the DPC, part of the conditions was revenue enhancement. I said so. Now, when he says I didn't say something, he can never quote what I said, you know. They can never quote what I said. If they don't cut me on it, if they don't cut it or move it, they can never say what I said. Like the appointment of the Deputy Speaker. He was all over the place writing letters, you know, letters. Bar Association, I will appoint somebody today who is not a member of the House. I never said so. He wrote the UN, he wrote the ambassador to whoever he can find. Say, I am breaking the Constitution. I never said that I would appoint a Deputy Speaker from outside the House today. I never said so. Mr. Speaker, so let's get back, and I'm sorry, because some of my colleagues didn't want me to speak. But Mr. Speaker, I have to, because these things go out in public, and some people repeat it on the radio, and some people believe it. Mr. Speaker, let's look at the management. Let's look at how the St. Lucia economy has advanced and the progress in the St. Lucia economy. Mr. Speaker, you know, a measure of the robustness of the St. Lucia economy, Mr. Speaker, is something called the primary balance. A measure of how the economy is robust is the revenue that government collects without imposing more taxation. Without imposing more taxation. I said in public how much the health and security levy collected. I said so in public. I didn't hide it. The public knows. And in the policy statement, the public will hear how much we have spent on health and security and how much we intend to spend on health and security. Because the public is benefiting. The mothers of this country are benefiting from the maternal care, health care, from the Ministry of Health. The people who are over 80 that you ridiculed, that you put pampers in your demonstration, you ridicule them. These people are benefiting from you call them Teletubbies. The people that you say you let the people so much, but you'll never get. If any of these men or women here do anything that I get up by telling me wrong, and they know that, but you have accepted everything because you're not in control of your party. That's your problem. So you cannot, and that is why somebody said, "C'est pas flambeau," because the flambeau we know is the flambeau of respect. A flambeau that does not go into the gutters, how that flambeau is going. A flambeau that we go, a flambeau of decency. I run elections against Romanus Lancico. Romanus Lancico has never gone down to that heights. Never gone to that level. We criticized each other heavily. We fought. But when he was ill, we spoke. He never had this hatred and this envy that you perpetuate in this country. Never. Because you've lost government. People, you're perpetuating hatred. You're making people envious of each other. You're making people, I mean, Mr. Speaker, you know, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition says that there is no growth in this country. There is no growth. There is nothing. This country is in a mess. They made a big fuss about roads. We don't fix the roads. He knew very well that I never controlled the weather. Right now, the roads are improving. Not a word said. Not a word. Because he did not know. You see, as we always do them, we are men and women who plan. We are men of women. The Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker, started under him. Under him. Under him. Under him. Under him, Mr. Speaker. You understand? So let's get back to roads. They made a big fuss. We came here and we agreed. We understood and we said that the roads were in a state that was not acceptable. All of us agreed. All of us agreed to that. But we said that there are certain factors that had to be considered. Number one, the road infrastructure in this country has been under tremendous pressure for a long time. But our issue on roads, when he was the member of Vieux-Fort South, we were the ones who built the highway from Soufrière to Vieux-Fort. We were the ones. We are the ones who resurfaced the East Coast Road. We were the ones. We are the ones who built all the roads in the Kareli area. We were the ones. And we were the ones who had a loan completely negotiated for the Castries Grocery Highway, which they stopped. So, Mr. Speaker, they come and they grant charge about roads. But our history, our history is clear, Mr. Speaker. So that is why all they have to deal with is misinformation. So let's get back. Let's get back to listen to his theory. Listen to his theory. You must try your best in a small open economy. You must try your best for your inflation rate. Now you know he got stuck in the middle. He got stuck in the middle. Your inflation rate must not be more than your growth rate. Oh my. A small open economy. Your inflation rate must not be more than your growth rate, so you must do something to bring down your inflation rate. Now you think I can deal with that? But you see, my colleagues told me no answer. Leave him alone. But how you can get involved in that? How can somebody stand up in a parliament, in a small open economy, and say that we can control our economic growth with our inflation growth? Then he goes again. This is what he says again. Listen. When you import most of the products, we have no control. We import gas, we import diesel, we import most of our food. We import all that. How can we control our inflation rate? What's the Then he comes. And listen. So your economic growth must not be higher than your debt ratio. Now you want me to speak of your debt. Your economic growth must be higher than your debt. Now, Mr. Speaker, then the growth of your debt. You understand what I say? That's what you say. Then the growth of your debt, which is different than your debt growth. When you think it's different, it's different. Now, Mr. Speaker, listen to the logic. Listen. A country can raise revenue, Mr. Speaker, by three sources. 1, 2, 3. 1, taxes. 2, loans. 3, grants. 3 areas. Let's look at each of them, one after the other. Taxes. What kind of taxes you have? Personal tax, corporate tax, which is indirect taxation, and indirect taxation, VAT, etc., etc. How do you raise corporate tax? You raise corporate tax by investment and taxing businesses. But the truth is, to incentivize that growth, you have to give tax rebates and forgo revenue because of tax incentives that you give. So the investment that comes in, because of the taxes you have to forgo to create the investment, your level of collection of taxation from your investment, your direct collection of taxes is lowered because most of these investors pay no tax because we have to incentivize them to come to St. Lucia. So who is left to pay the tax? Local business people who do not pay taxes, who most of the time the taxes are low, local business people, banks and foreign institutions. So the problem is, you have to get your level of investment at a particular level, Mr. Speaker, where the multiplier effect of that investment created by employment, etc., Mr. Speaker, is such that you can enhance your revenue, or else you have to go for indirect taxes. So what have we done? What have we done? We've reduced the threshold of direct taxes, and we've further enhanced the environment for regular people to begin to build their homes or to improve their homes by removing VAT on basic building material. That's where we've gone. So how can you tell me that a country that has just come through a crisis of COVID, which you didn't create, but you try to blame us for the Ukraine war, a country that has come through that stage of development, Mr. Speaker, can control its inflation and can stop its debt, growth of debt, from being more than its economic growth. 3 factors in one. Now, Mr. Speaker, now you think any student of economics will tell you, and I don't profess to be any economist. I didn't tell anybody. My CV is very simple. I profess to be nothing. No. My CV is different. And the name of my party is the St. Lucia Labour Party. I know no party called the Union Workers' Party. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, that when things are said and they sound to be right, when people are accused of all sorts of things, Mr. Speaker, I said clearly that this loan is for budgetary support. The member for Vivo for Castries, from Miku South, says, what is budgetary support? I mean, what is budgetary support? So, Mr. Speaker, next week we are going to be debating the estimates, and already he has begun to call to question what's in the estimates. Already, you know, he started already to plant seeds of misinformation and disinformation. He started. The same way he had some misguided thing about rate of employment. After it was clearly stated why. But he continues about rate of employment, read this, read that. He has already begun to plant the seeds of misinformation and disinformation in the heads of the people of St. Lucia, by already beginning to question the government's performance even before he has seen the results. But I can assure the public of St. Lucia that next week, when we show the government's financial statement, you will see a steady improvement in the financial statement of the government of St. Lucia. A steady improvement, Mr. Speaker, a steady improvement. And you will see that the policies of this government has led and will lead, all things being equal, because there are downside risks. And we are clear about the downside risks, will lead to St. Lucia having the lowest level of unemployment in St. Lucia for a long time, including youth unemployment. And they came here, instead of allowing the youth economy to mushroom and see what happens, he criticized it. They pappy showed it. They made a mess. You understand? His idea of jobs for young people was only one idea only. DSH, skin horses, one idea. You'd like to see the young men in Beaufort, they will take pride to bathe horses. That is the idea of jobs. It'll be pride to bathe horses. Pride. That's his idea. And the second idea, Mr. Speaker, which idea that we started, Vivo South MP, we started, was in the call centers. We started. So he pretends he's a king of call centers. Call centers started under us. We went into business with a local businessman. We promoted a local businessman to go into call centers under the leadership of the member of Vivo South. We were the revolutionary people as far as that's concerned. But we didn't give that businessman a yacht. So, you know, the time will come when we'll have to debate. The time will come when we will be able to deal with these issues. Because these issues of misinformation that have been spread in this country, continuously causing it, and always, and before they do, he accuses us. Mr. Speaker, which member of this honorable house we waste money? Where is the waste? Where is the waste? Point out the waste. Tell me where the waste is. What have we done? We bought vehicles for the police. That's what we've done. Where's the waste? These gentlemen, the cars that they drive are cars you gave them. Are cars you gave your ministers. And they complain every day about the state of the cars. Some of them stopping everywhere. You understand? So you come about waste and waste. The offices that we have, the offices offices that you are the one who did the offices back. Then they came and they said, I spent $100,000 in my office. I've asked everybody to come and see what $100,000 I spent. All I did is I changed a set of chairs and I painted there. And it's leaking. So this waste, where's the waste? The Prime Minister's office? The changes there is he's the one who did it, not me. Not me. Where's the waste? Tell me. Where is the waste? Point out directly where is the waste. For these gentlemen to travel, Mr. Speaker, they have to get permission. So, Mr. Speaker, so you talking about the Prime Minister's official residence. They mash up piece of it. The damaged piece of it, Mr. Speaker. And after the damaged piece of it, they take it out completely. But Mr. Speaker, I just want Mr. Speaker, and I'm sorry for people who think I should not speak, Mr. Speaker, but I must speak. Because if I don't speak, these things, people believe these things. People believe these things. Then, yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I did not officially congratulate Julian Alfred, but I heard something about a round table about Julian Alfred, Mr. Speaker. And it was a friendly debate, a friendly questionnaire. Tell the people what you did for Rev. Well, I can tell you they may have been a lull in giving, but I can tell you what they did was 4 times more, even though they may be a lull. And from since she was in primary school, in Jamaica, the lady was in primary school. Where? Yes. But when they say these things, they say primary school in Jamaica. But in the haste to try to discredit the government, in the haste to pretend that nothing is going in St. Lucia, nothing right is going in St. Lucia. St. Lucia is in a mess. St. Lucia is in complete chaos. I mean, that is the impression that the opposition wants to give the world about St. Lucia. And that's not good, Mr. Speaker. That's not good. You can't afford to burn the house to kill a rat. You should not do that. And what you're doing is you deliberately spreading falsities. You deliberately taking information you know is incorrect and peddling it, Mr. Speaker, just because you are not in government. Stop it, Mr. Speaker. Stop it. Mr. Speaker, I ask members to support this resolution. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow an amount of special drawing rights, $30,500,000, the loan from the International Development Association to finance the St. Lucia Sustainable Recovery Development Policy financing. Be it resolved that A, the service charge is 0.75% per annum on the withdrawn credit balance. B, the maximum commitment charge is 0.5% of 1% per annum on the unwithdrawn financing balance. C, the loan is repayable in 40 years, commencing from the date of disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. D, the loan is repayable in semi-annual installments on the first day of April and first day of October of each year after the grace period. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Finance Minister.
Speaker, whereas it's provided by Section 63(1)(a) of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 15.0 on the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for the capital or current expenditure of government. And whereas it is further provided under Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and form part of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, apologies. Mr. Speaker, I beg to the following resolution signed in my name. Whereas it provided that under Section 22(1) of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 15.01, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by affirmative resolution of Parliament, establish a special fund to collect money that must be used for a specific purpose. And whereas it further provided under Section 22(2) of the Act, that the resolution of subsection 1 must state the purpose of the special fund, the money to be paid into the special fund, the means of collecting money to be paid into the special fund, the source of the monies of the special fund, the accounting officer responsible for the administration of the special fund, the terms of which the special fund should be nominated. And whereas the Minister of Finance, with the approval of Parliament, consider it necessary to establish a special fund to be known as the Tourism Development Fund, the fund, for the purpose of facilitating the operations, tourism development, and tourism marketing of the Department of Tourism. And whereas the source and monies to be paid into the fund comprises the sums allocated by Parliament, the penalties and interest under Section 117 of the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, the surplus tourism levy revenue under Section 119 of the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, any grants received by the Department of Tourism in relation to the tourism development, any fees charged under the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, all of the sums that may become payable to or vested in the Department of Tourism in respect of matters incidental to its functions and powers. And whereas Section 23 of the Act relating to payment and accounting procedure applies to the fund, and whereas in accordance with Section 23(2) and 3 of the Act, the accounting officer administering the fund shall, within a period of 1 month after the end of the financial year, prepare, sign, and submit to the Accountant General statements showing the financial position of the fund at the end of the financial year. B. The statements under paragraph A must include a statement of the assets and liabilities of the fund, a detailed statement of receipts and payments of the fund, and a statement of investments and interest or dividends credited to the fund. And whereas the Permanent Secretary at the Department of Tourism is accounting officer who is responsible for administering the fund, and whereas the fund must be maintained unless it is closed by the Minister of Finance under Section 4 of the Act, and whereas the Minister of Finance receives a report from the Permanent Secretary or the Department of Tourism to indicate that the purpose for which the fund was established has been fulfilled or no longer exists, and in the opinion of the Minister, there is no likelihood that the purpose for which the fund could lawfully be used will arise in the future, or the term specified in this resolution for the fund has expired. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to establish a special fund to be known as the Tourism Development Fund for the purpose of facilitating the operations, the operations, tourism development, and tourism marketing of the Department of Tourism. Be it further resolved, the source and monies to be paid into the fund comprises the sums allocated by Parliament, interest and penalties under Section 117 of the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, the surplus tourism levy revenue under Section 119 of the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, the grants received by the Department of Tourism in relation to tourism development, the fees charged under the Tourism Development Act, number 1 of 2024, all of the sums that may become payable to or vested in the Department of Tourism in respect of matters incidental to its functions and powers, in accordance with Section 23(2) and 3 of the Act, the accounting officer administering the fund shall, within a period of 1 month after the end of the financial year, prepare, sign, and submit to the Accountant General statements showing the financial position of the fund at the end of the financial year. The statements under subparagraph 1 must include a statement of assets and liabilities of the fund, a detailed statement of receipts and payments of the fund, and a statement of investment and interest dividends credited to the fund. Section 23(1) of the Act relating to the payment and accounting procedures applies to the fund. The Permanent Secretary of the Department of Tourism is the accounting officer who is responsible for administering the fund. The fund must be maintained unless it is closed by the Minister of Finance under Section 24 of the Act, where the Minister of Finance receives a report from the Permanent Secretary, the Department of Finance to indicate that the purpose for which the fund was established has been fulfilled or no longer exists, and in the opinion of the Minister, there is no likelihood that the purpose for which the fund could be lawfully be used will arise in the future, or the term specified in this resolution for the fund has expired. Mr. Speaker, as it's clear that this fund, Mr. Speaker, is to create the tourism. This fund, Mr. Speaker, is to establish the Tourism Development Fund, Mr. Speaker. The purposes are well stated in this resolution, and contrary to criticism that may come upon me, because I give my ministers the responsibility and I have the confidence in them, Mr. Speaker, to deal with the issues that are under their portfolio. I do not believe I know all. We don't run a government where one man knows all. We run a government of cooperation, a government where we work together, Mr. Speaker. So the Minister of Tourism will give further details of this resolution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to establish a special fund to be known as the Tourism Development Fund for the purpose of facilitating the operations, tourism development, and tourism marketing of the Department of Tourism. Be it further resolved that A, the source and monies to be paid into the fund comprises 1, the sums allocated by Parliament, 2, interest and penalties under Section 117 of the Tourism Development Act number 1 of 2024, 3, the surplus tourism levy revenue under Section 119 of the Tourism Development Act number 1 of 2024, 4, the grants received by the Department of Tourism in relation to tourism development, 5, the fees charged under the Tourism Development Act number 1 of 2024, 6, all other sums that may become payable to or vested in the Department of Tourism in respect of matters incidental to his functions and powers. B, in accordance with Section 23(2) and 23(3) of the Act, 1, the accounting officer administering the fund shall, within a period of 1 month after the end of the financial year, prepare, sign, and submit to the Accountant General statements showing the financial position of the fund at the end of the financial year. 2, the statements under subparagraph 1 must include A, a statement of the assets and liability of the fund, B, a detailed statement of receipts and payments of the fund, and C, a statement of investments and interest or dividends credited to the fund. C, Section 23(1) of the Act relating to the payment and accounting procedures applies to the fund. D, the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Tourism is the accounting officer who is responsible for administering the fund. E, the fund must be maintained unless 1, it is closed by the Minister for Finance under Section 24 of the Act, where the Minister for Finance receives a report from the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Finance to indicate that the purpose for which the fund was established has been fulfilled or no longer exists, and in the opinion of the Minister, there is no likelihood that the purpose for which the fund could lawfully be used will arise in the future, or 2, the terms specified in this resolution for the fund have expired. Minister of Tourism.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe the member from Kasserine is the Prime Minister in presenting the motion, clearly articulated the intent and purposes of the Tourism Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, on February 20th, when we met in this Honorable House and we debated the new Tourism Development Bill, which has now been enacted, I presented to this Honorable House the necessity for us to have the Tourism Development Fund, and I went into some detail as to the role that it would play and the purposes for which it would have been created. So, Mr. Speaker, I will not take a very long time, Mr. Speaker. But before I proceed, Mr. Speaker, I really have to say something I did not contribute on the earlier debate. But just for the information of this Honorable House, whilst I listened to the member from Miku South speak about the IMF Article 4 consultation report, and he presented it as if the government had withheld the information, and it had taken so long for the report to be made public that the consultation took place in August, but it was only just released in March. And something just spiked my interest, you know, the curiosity that one can have sometimes. And I said, let me just find out in the past what happened under his watch. Because I was wondering, is it unusual for there to be such a long period before which reports are released? And I decided, let me just pick the 2019 report. You know, and I did a little research online. When was the 2019 report released? February 24th, 2020. February 24th, 2020. So I then researched, when did the consultation take place? February 7th, 2019. 1 year after. Why would the consultation have taken place on February the 7th, 2019, but the report only made public February 2020? And you cannot say COVID. You cannot use COVID as an excuse. So why under you, it took more than a year for the report to be made public, but in this instance, you are presenting to St. Lucia and the world that something is untold. Something is unusual because it took a certain period of time for it to be released. So probably, Mr. Speaker, that he knows something that we don't know. Dishonesty, you call it. And you know, speaking on that subject, again we have to come back, Mr. Speaker, to the conduct of the leader of the opposition. There he was writing all over the world. All over St. Lucia is writing letters to the Attorney General that we are going to breach the Constitution. He wrote to the bar and said to the bar, can you work with me? Can you work with me, because they have no respect for the Constitution. They are going to breach the Constitution. And he threatened to go to court and all and have injunction against Parliament because we are going to breach the Constitution. And I started wondering, in which reality does he exist? Is this a case of Alice in Wonderland? Or Alan in Wonderland? What is this about? And then he decides, and somebody told me he wrote to United Nations, OES. He writes to everybody, even write to former ambassadors to ambassadors in St. Lucia. He wrote to ambassadors in St. Lucia that we are going to breach the Constitution. Which Constitution? We don't breach Constitution on this side of the house. Yeah, he wrote the script.
Which king?
For someone who spent 5 years never appointing a deputy speaker, I think he has a kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome. Why would you believe that every action somebody would take would be as nefarious as yours? Why? And he comes there this morning and he witnesses democracy in action. The member from Beaufort South accepts to be the deputy speaker. Now, he can say he anticipated that.
That's not true.
So let's assume if you had anticipated that, why did you write all the letters? Why did you announce to the world? Is it a mind that is so warped? Why? Tell me. So you could not have anticipated that. But even if you had anticipated it, it reveals the worst side of you as a politician, as a former leader of this country. The worst side. But I heard they were rejoicing, saying, Kenya Anthony will never accept it. Does anybody believe that the member from Beaufort South, the grandfather of the Labour Party right now, would act in a manner to undermine the St. Lucia Labour Party? They are taking joy, they say, when he stands up and he lectures us. He can lecture me any day. He has earned the right to do that. He's earned the right to do that. Just like Julian Hunt, so Julian Hunt can lecture me, Sir Alex George can lecture me. They have earned the right in our party. We respect our party leaders and the elders in our party. That's the difference between us and them. So Dr. Anthony is a man of integrity, a man of character, and he loves this Labour Party. Don't get involved in our business when he's lecturing us, if he ever stands up there. Let me tell you, many of us on this side has never had a better teacher than him. So if he took joy believing that we'll be left, we won't have a deputy speaker, and he's going to go on. I heard they had injunction papers already prepared, ready to file. You're going to take your documents and shred it. And shred it, because you came here anticipating that there would be no deputy speaker and there would be chaos, and you'd run to the courts and file an injunction. Yeah, according to the member from Castries, is put the papers in your pipe and smoke it. So, Mr. Speaker, the Tourism Development Fund is based on a fundamental principle in the Tourism Development Bill, and that is of building resilience. The fund, by its very nature, will accumulate monies that can be used for the future development of the tourism industry. It will be used to ensure that the operations of the tourism department are met. It will be used as well, Mr. Speaker, to deal with issues that will arise, especially when we have challenges from natural disaster and other challenges in the industry. Look at what we just went through with COVID. We actually had no reserves to go to in this country to deal with some of the sectors that were affected. We believe in the building resilience in the industry. And by having a fund that has monies in it, when we do face a challenge, and God forbid we never have another COVID, but it may be some other challenge we face, we would have some resources available somewhere that the industry can use it for it to rebound. It will also assist us in maintaining infrastructure for the tourism industry. It will assist us in many other aspects in the operations of the tourism industry. So for us, it's a critical tool in achieving the principles and the dreams and the goals, the vision that we had when we passed the Tourism Development Bill. It will take some time for the resources to build, but we now have the basis upon which we can build. And we must, Mr. Speaker, in all that we say, still credit the last government for having gotten the tourism levy going and at least starting to create that dedicated stream of financing that we can use for marketing in this instance. And we're going to broaden that concept of having resources available to assist in the tourism industry. For us on this side, we want to transform the tourism industry. Some person said I should not continue spreading this narrative about more St. Lucians owning the tourism industry. But we believe it on this side of the house. We believe that more St. Lucians should be operating, more St. Lucians should be owning the tourism industry. And during the estimates next week and in the policy debate, I will be saying a lot more about what we are doing to ensure that the tourism industry, for us, it is an indigenization of the tourism industry, making sure indigenous initiative, indigenous effort can benefit from the tourism industry. And in many ways, is ensuring that the political economy of the tourism industry is such that as many solutions as possible can benefit from the industry and can prosper within the tourism industry. So today, Mr. Speaker, is a simple motion to start putting in place many of the elements of the Tourism Development Bill to achieve that vision that we have of a more inclusive, a more resilient, and a more sustainable industry. And again, like I said, next week in the estimates, a lot more would be said on that. So I support the motion as presented by the member from Castries East. Thank you very much.
The member from Mico South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't really my intention, Mr. Speaker, to delve in any kind of detail or even superficially into the appointment of the Deputy Speaker, but certainly I hope, Mr. Speaker, given that the member from Castries South has opened up the box, the Pandora's box, you will allow me to respond in some kind of detail, Mr. Speaker. The member, all of a sudden there's a motion. When you went on your journey...
Member, when a member responds to what you say, why are you responding? There's only one chair. And then you're going to say your time is up.
Thank you very much for your advice, Mr. Speaker. Always very much appreciated. So, Mr. Speaker, on the situation with the Deputy Speaker, and members want to, how did we arrive at this position? Members on the opposite side, Mr. Speaker, when they were in opposition for 5 years, made an allegation that there was a breach of the Constitution because of their own interpretation of the Act, and many people around this table share that interpretation, and that's their privilege. We all can interpret things of the Constitution. Constitution is not necessarily, Mr. Speaker, always a very easy document to understand. The document, the Constitution, was very clear about the Deputy Speaker. It always envisaged, always, that the Deputy Speaker would come from a member who is in the House. That means a member of Parliament had to be the Deputy Speaker. Always. And the Constitution also makes a very clear clarification between government and opposition. That's why there's a government and there's an opposition. And when it speaks to the House, it speaks of the collective assembly of our Parliament, meaning both the opposition as well as the government. And in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that when the House first meets, Mr. Speaker, when it first meets, Mr. Speaker, there has to be the election of a Speaker, and the Speaker may come from either among the members of the House or a person who comes from outside the House. It could be elected. That's the first order of business. The second order of the business of the House, Mr. Speaker, is that we must have a Deputy Speaker elected in order for the House to proceed. It is also very clear, Mr. Speaker, at any point, for whatever circumstances, that a Speaker vacates the position of the Speaker of the House must have a Speaker before it reconvenes. It must. Cannot proceed without that. In the case of the Deputy Speaker, Mr. Speaker, what it says is that the House, what it said, before the amendment, Mr. Speaker, what it said is that the House must elect a member from the House who does not hold the position either of a minister nor of a Parliament secretary at its earliest convenience. It doesn't say that the House needs to proceed or needs a Speaker, a Deputy Speaker to proceed. Now, that is a...
Member for Mico South, with all due respect, you sought the latitude of the chair to respond to what the member for Castries South said. At no point in time in the Castries South MP's presentation did he proceed along the lines that you are going down. What he spoke about was your anticipation of what would happen today. So I am always a student for learning. So as much as I appreciate your lecture on the Constitution, the member for Castries South never ventured down that path. So if you're going to seek my latitude, please respond to what he said.
I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. But I am getting to his question because he did say that we were surprised or ought not to have been surprised by the appointment of a member from the House, and that our anticipation that somebody was going to come from outside the House, Mr. Speaker. I was giving the background to how we got there. So the fact is, Mr. Speaker, and let me hurry it up for everyone, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that after 5 years of crying, rather than taking it to the courts, the government, when it came in, decided to fulfill a campaign promise, Mr. Speaker, and that it was going to amend the Constitution. And there were supposed to be 2 amendments to the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. One amendment, Mr. Speaker, was supposed to be that we must have a deputy speaker in the House. So it cannot be at its earliest convenience anymore. And that section of the Constitution was amended to say that if a deputy speaker resigned, we must immediately or no later than the next House sitting elect a new deputy speaker. And that's fine. The problem, though, was the second amendment they were supposed to make, Mr. Speaker, was to say that the deputy speaker must come from the government side. Okay? But you see, they didn't do that, Mr. Speaker. Although that's what they had been advocating all along. Instead, what did they do? They said that the deputy speaker can come from either within the House, one of its members who was not a cabinet member or a parliamentary secretary, or somebody from outside. So how can members on the opposite side want to sit here for any moment and convince anyone in St. Lucia there was never a contemplation on their side of possibly bringing in a deputy speaker from outside the House?
Member, I can't allow you to prolong on that. The Prime Minister made it abundantly clear up to this morning. He never said members of his side contemplated or did not contemplate. What he said was clear and unambiguous, that he never made a statement that the deputy speaker would come from outside the House. That is what the Prime Minister said. So you are now bringing a new element about whether the government contemplated bringing a deputy speaker. Clearly, if an amendment is made where it allows for a deputy speaker from outside, it does mean that the government would contemplate at some point in time. But today, the Prime Minister made it, if I may borrow a phrase from the late Forbes Burnham, pellucidly clear that he never said, not that he never contemplated, but he never said that he intended to bring a deputy speaker from outside. So you've made your point. I think you can move on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. But it is important to say that they created the option of either having the person appointed. And there were several press conferences and public pronouncements by the government, and the Prime Minister included, in which many people would have interpreted that the intention was to bring somebody from now. In fact, Mr. Speaker, there was even rumors as to who those persons would be. But I move on, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, as the leader of the opposition, I had to take my job very seriously, and to remind the government that even though they may have made that amendment to that section, Mr. Speaker, that it's still required for Section 30 to be amended. Because it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, the framers of the Constitution give the latitude, Mr. Speaker, for Parliament to amend the Constitution by themselves. But there are special sections within the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, in which the framers of the Constitution make it very clear that the parliamentarians by themselves, even with a 2/3 majority, cannot make those amendments by themselves. It must include the approval of the people, which is through a referendum. And so, Mr. Speaker, next week we are about to approve what should be something very simple, which is the estimates. And in proving the estimates, a lot of people may not have realized that. The estimates are not approved at the end of the debate. The estimates are approved once they are laid in the House. and it is required, Mr. Speaker, a very important part of our constitutional process, that in order for the government to pay salaries on April 1st, in order for government to pay debt or to pay any of the operating costs, the estimates must be approved before March 31st. If they are not, then we would be in the breach of the Financial Act. And if, in fact, Mr. Speaker, the government had taken up its option, of which it had alluded to, and come to the House and attempted to have approved a deputy speaker from outside the House, it would have been our responsibility to have pointed out the illegality of that process. So, Mr. Speaker, the members from the opposition are in fact very pleased and happy to see that the government decided not to put the Constitution to test and have not decided to place our finances of this country in a quagmire, and have done the reasonable thing of choosing and who you wanted to choose on your side. As long as they were not a minister or not a parliamentary secretary, we can proceed. So, Mr. Speaker, I move on now to the tourism thing. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that I am extremely pleased by not only the member from Castries South in his recent pronouncements, but also for the majority of the members on the opposite side of the government side, of their new discovery of the importance of tourism. And I welcome, honestly, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the fact now that we don't have to get into this nonsensical debate about tourism and racism, subservience, etc., that we have to now start understanding the importance of foreign direct investment, Mr. Speaker. And that we're not going to demonize tourism. We're not going to demonize foreign direct investment. And in fact, we are now going to be able to create an environment to support the growth of tourism. And the fact is that the difference between the two political parties at this point on tourism, Mr. Speaker, is how to do that, but not anymore whether we should do that. Because it has been very questionable by the actions and the policies and the statements made publicly by some of the members of government as to whether they really, truly, genuinely appreciate it. I mean, even the member from Castries East, in his pronouncement that all of a sudden he now didn't know that, understand tourism, and he now understands the importance of tourism. I don't criticize him for that. I welcome that we finally have gotten to that threshold where both sides now can agree. So, Mr. Speaker, all of a sudden now, sandals and all-inclusive, and whether it's negative against the country, I see now there's a new love affair and a new embracing of sandals as to how great they are and the contribution they're not only making in St. Lucia but throughout the region. So I say to the members on the opposite side, thank you, finally, that you've reached up to us and we can now celebrate Butch Stewart, a great individual who we should all be very proud of as a West Indian man, as to building a brand in the Caribbean that is globally competitive, and the thousands of jobs and the millions of dollars that he's invested into this region. I am glad now that the members on the opposite side have embraced that. I am so happy, Mr. Speaker, and even more happy for the people at Cabot, that the members on the opposite side now have recognized that this is a world-class investment and this is going to make a significant economic contribution to the country, and have understood that it's not just about a hotel, it's not just about a golf course, but it's about real estate development and the jobs that are going to be generated and preparing our workforce to be able to not only take up those jobs, but to do them at a world-class level, because the Cabot, Mr. Speaker, has been ranked number 75 in the world already. And projections are that it will make it into the top 20. I want to remind us in this House, Mr. Speaker, only one other golf course in the entire Caribbean has made it into the 100 rank, and that is in the Dominican Republic. And it was ranked number 74 this year. Cabot is one behind it in its first year. And I'm just so glad to see members going to Cabot, participating in the opening, and finally, Mr. Speaker, publicly embracing Cabot and the investors of Cabot. That is a good sign. Mr. Speaker, it is good to see the embracing of Marriott Courtyard, because I know that there was a hesitation on some of the members on the opposite side whether we should be putting a hotel near Point Seraphin. I am so happy, and you all are welcome, that when you all came in that the project had already been signed, financing, negotiating, and work had already begun. I am so happy, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have to be in a point of contention anymore as to whether that was a good investment or not. That was good. That was started by us. We celebrate the fact that you've now embraced it and you're continuing it. Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry that my friend from member of Castries Central is not here. He has repeatedly, and I believe I didn't hear him today, but I'm pretty sure it's one of his top 10 list of things he loves to talk about, is the acquisition of the land at Mont Piedmont, Mr. Speaker. Both the land was acquired at Mont Piedmont, as well as the land at Shock. And I dare say the land that Galaxy is being built on was also acquired back after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, Mr. Speaker. So guess what? When we came into government, we found out that both Shock and Mont Piedmont were still in receivership. And we knew that even if we identified an investor, there were plenty of hurdles that would have to be overcome. So the government acquired the lands for $11 million through Invest in Lucia. So Invest in Lucia purchased the lands from the receiver in the UK and got terms for the financing. The land at Shock was sold for, I think it's just either under or above $6 million. And then the lands recently, based on what I've seen in public announcements with Mont Piedmont, was sold for $15 million. So that means that the two properties that were owned by Invest in Lucia that were acquired by our government for $11 million was actually now sold for $21 million. That means Invest in Lucia, when it gets paid, would have actually made a profit of $11 million. But more importantly, because Invest owned it, Invest had the ability of being able to control the narrative of those investors in terms of what they're going to be. So I am happy that my government was able to do that. I'm even happier now that there is no argument by members on the opposite side as to how brilliant of a decision that was, and to embrace that as a positive move and to grow on that. Mr. Speaker, Galaxy. Again, Galaxy was sold the land under the CIP program, and Galaxy is building 3 hotels in that location. And I'm so happy to see that members on the opposite side traveling to Dubai, getting them to sponsor all kinds of things, and how embracive they are to that project, and how encouraging the news is of the progress of that particular project. And to see that the members on the other side finally now believe in that project, because initially there was a lot of doom and gloom. But I am so happy, Mr. Speaker, to hear members on the opposite, especially the CIP program, encouraged by what's taking place there and the development that's taking place in the South and the impact it's going to have. Sabusham, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm happy to hear that when the government came in, that they continued. And even though there was some misunderstandings in the initial part, and I understand that, thinking that the Bulgarians that are at Sabusham were the Bulgarians that they left there, to now find out that they're 2 separate companies. And again, I want to be able to thank the Bulgarians that are doing Marriott Courtyard, that when they realized the difficulties they were having with that project, they found a new investor. And I'm very grateful that the government has continued to do the work. These things take time. I know you're getting the road fixed up, and I know the displacement of some of the residents there is being worked on. I want to congratulate you, but it's because of your new understanding of tourism and the impact it's going to have on St. Lucians that I see this new renewed effort on your part to make these things happen. I am very happy. Mr. Speaker, I hope now that members on the opposite side would have realized when they went to Coconut Bay that there's 2 hotels at Coconut Bay. There's the old Coconut Bay and there's Serenity. And the impact of a high-end property in Coconut Bay, and in terms of the employment it's generated and the economic activity it's generated. And again, I'm hoping, I'm pretty sure I know they will, because of their renewed understanding of tourism, that when the expansion plans come to expand both Serenity and even Coconut Bay, that I know that members on the opposite side will embrace that and facilitate it so they can happen as quickly as possible. Mr. Speaker, village tourism. Despite, again, the members wanting to change the name, that's commonplace with the members on the opposite side. I want to encourage them to really understand the detail behind the village tourism. if we are going to have more St. Lucians, and that's what we want to see that the expansion of tourism, Mr. Speaker, that more St. Lucians are given that opportunity. And it's very difficult when you have a small property, Mr. Speaker, to make the infrastructural investments by yourself. I mean, I went through that personally with Coco Creole, which was originally 12 rooms. It is virtually impossible to make a decent return on that size property. This is why it was hurtful, Mr. Speaker. I have to be honest with you. When members of the opposite side wanted to play, and let me restrain from using that adjective, play cheap politics in the sense that roads, you can't eat roads. The roads up to your area in Salty Bluffs. How many people, and we know them, I visited their homes, do Airbnb, and who are now so grateful for the fact that it makes it easier to be able to sell those properties. Roads in Gros Islet, Cassenbach, that all of a sudden, well, I wish, Foston Hills is a story for you, okay? I'll be happy to touch it. But again, the roads are no longer just about making it comfortable for us to drive. It's to open up more opportunities. And that's, again, Mr. Speaker, there's two aspects to village tourism that I have said and I want to be able to reiterate, Mr. Speaker. One is to be an incubator, to be able to provide access to these strong hotels or restaurants, to software, to interior decorators, to financial support, and also to make it even better for the banks, Mr. Speaker. That when the banks now are lending monies to these small businesses, the banks know that there's somebody they can go to. Because there's somebody holding that investor's hand. And many of our banks, Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that tourism is such a big part of our economy, they themselves have lacked the appropriate skills, Mr. Speaker, to assess tourism properly and to be able to provide that support. So village tourism was to be an incubator to help people who want to get into the industry, whether it's by way of an attraction, whether it's by way of an Airbnb, whether it's by way of having a small room, whether it's by having a restaurant, whether it's by having an art shop and a gift shop, but facilitating them through an incubator with all the professional skills that they would need. The second component of village tourism, Mr. Speaker, which is very important, is the infrastructure. So when you go down to an Ancillary, or you go down to a Canneries, or you go to a Soufriere, that all of the villas and Airbnbs that are on the exterior, the reception of the hotel becomes the village. That there's restaurants, shops, and activity that they can participate in. That is what generates the character. That is what's going to differentiate St. Lucia by authentic tourism. The big hotels play their important part, Mr. Speaker, because they drive volume, and that is necessary. But it's going to be impossible for St. Lucians themselves to build a Sandals, to build a St. James Hotel. I'm hoping that one day it will not be impossible. But for now, there are not many St. Lucians who have the financial or wherewithal to build a hotel of that size. So in the meanwhile, what are we going to do to help them get into the industry? So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that conceptually, this idea of this fund is a very good thing. Again, when I go back to the act that was passed and the absence of the regulations, the teeth of the matter, the details of the matter, there's one thing that is in this proposal that concerns me a little bit. Who is going to determine what the excess amount of money from the levy is going to be? Because it was really my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that when we put the levy together, the levy was to be used for marketing. Why? Because the hotels are already paying taxes at the airport. Their customer comes in, they pay $98. All of the electricity cost. And even when they're bringing in food and they're bringing in their operating materials, they pay duties on that. That's not duty free. The hotels in the tourism sector is already paying a significant amount of money to the taxes. And the purpose of this was really to put the money in and having it related to the performance. What do I mean by that, Mr. Speaker? I'm hoping in their new exuberance of tourism that members on the opposite side will also appreciate that marketing is not a cost. Marketing is an investment. And the investment that you make with marketing is branding. And branding is what drives value. If you take a three-star hotel in St. Lucia, it's probably going to get an average of $120 to $150 rate per night. That same hotel in Barbados gets $200 and something. That same hotel in Cayman gets over $600 a night. And that is what? The branding of the destination. It is the marketing of the destination that creates now added value. And that added value is very important because the operating costs in St. Lucia are so high. So, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say to the government, my little advice, if in fact you're going to use this, where you're going to make a discretionary decision as to how much the levy is going to be and how much of that percentage of that levy is going to remain in the fund, the marketing fund, the tourism, what's it called, the tourism authority. Who is going to make that decision? This does not say that. It only says it's possible. But nowhere does it describe what the overflow is. I can only assume it is an excess amount that you determine, because it's for the government or the Ministry of Tourism to determine how much the levy is going to be in the first place. So I assume it's the same persons that are going to say, well, 3/4 of the levy is going to remain in the Tourism Authority, and 1/3 is going to go into this. And I would hope to think that that's not the case. It has always been the belief that the extra revenue we're generating in tourism, the monies that we're going to get from donor countries, etc., that money would be used to help improve the infrastructure of tourism, not at the expense of marketing, Mr. Speaker. And I say this because we are now having a better conversation. Because we no longer have to have a discussion as to whether tourism is a good thing. We now know that. We're now getting into the details, and I'm going to say to all of us, it is important that we understand the marketing and branding in differentiating our product to drive the airlift and to drive the rates. Because with a proper brand, people are willing to pay more. And that more is absolutely necessary because the cost of electricity is too high here. And as the Prime Minister said, the member from Castries East said, hard to control that, I'm importing that. Cost of bringing containers in, expensive. Local transportation is high. We don't have the economies of scale. So the discussion that has to take place, Mr. Speaker, very importantly, is a plan for tourism. Where are we going? How many rooms do we want? And is that scientifically worked out? In terms of our own competitiveness, because it becomes back to our competitiveness. What are we doing to train our workers? What are we doing to train our service providers to go into the sectors of tourism that we want? Because tourism is not one thing in itself. There's romance, there's family, there's business, there's all kinds of tourism products, and all have different needs. So, Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate my position again. I am very happy, and we should all be, that both political parties now are going to embrace tourism. Both political parties now are going to talk no longer about demonizing foreign direct investors, no longer demonizing and being racist with the type of tourists that come to St. Lucia, but more importantly, that this nonsensical argument, that this rhetorical question that is asked all the time, how many rooms did you build? So again, Sandals, Cabot, Marriott Courtyard, Mount Pleasant, Mont Piedmont, Anshock, Galaxy, Sabusha, Serenity, just to name a few that we were involved in the last administration. Oh, we laugh. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's amazing to me how bold and which one? Okay, great. Congratulations. end of the day, we need all hands on deck. So I'm hoping that the members on the opposite side will continue with their new discovery of tourism and stop politicizing it and realize that we all need to be on the same page. The differences will come in terms of branding. The differences may come in the number of rooms, okay? But the fact is, let us agree that we have to move the needle forward and stop trying to make cheap political points at the expense of an industry that the member from Castries South now has admitted that it's resilient. It's withstood the test of times. It helps distribute income to all kinds. There are a whole bunch of people now that he's realized that depend on tourism and that can continue to grow. I'm so happy. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, I'm not even going to get into that, Mr. Speaker. I've made my point, Mr. Speaker. I thank you again for your opportunity for me to expand on the Deputy Speaker issue, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to this new relationship that we, both political parties, have as it pertains to tourism. And I look forward that we can work in collusion to make sure that St. Lucia is the best destination in the world and that the most number of St. Lucians are benefiting from it and that we can earn a satisfactory income to propel our country forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let me say a few. You know, Mr. Speaker, I promise
Member
you.
Castries Central, you need to be recognized before you stand.
Sorry,
You have now
Mr.
been recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes the haste with which one acts, because I was downstairs, Mr. Speaker, when the member for Miku South referred to me as his good friend, and he's sorry that I was absent. So I indeed, Mr. Speaker, had to make myself present, and I will make a contribution, albeit extremely brief, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before he leaves, ask him how many hotel rooms he built either when he was Minister of Tourism or Prime Minister. 10 years. In 10 years, the leader of the opposition, being in cabinet and in government together with your humble servant, seized with the responsibility of overseeing tourism in this country. How many hotels did he build? And I can bring Hansard to you, Mr. Speaker. On one occasion, he outlined 13 hotels that would be constructed under his watch as Minister of Tourism. As Prime Minister, it's the same thing, a lot of talk. And I could tell you, Mr. Speaker, a summation of the period when he was Minister of Tourism and Prime Minister for the aggregate 10 years, par memo Kaipul, Ife. No, oh oui, il fait le chouichoual, mais il pas fait hotel. Not one hotel room. And Mr. Speaker, you will not believe that during the period 2006 to 2011, when the leader of the opposition was Minister of Tourism, his budgetary allocation to ensure that he engineered new tourism practices to bring more people to our shores, you would not believe, was never under $45 million. Let me repeat that. For the 5 years he spent as Minister of Tourism, his allocation was no less than $45 million. What did he take that money to do, Mr. Speaker? Subsidize foreign airlines. Subsidize foreign airlines, boxing in paradise, all sorts of activities that brought no return to this country. Today, he's a tourism guru. Mr. Speaker. And you know what? With all that money, he subsidized all airlines apart from Liat. Because he does not believe in indigenous people or in... Yes, he brought American Eagle to compete with Liat. Those are the deeds of this man. So when you hear him speak, today he praises village tourism, which I like. I like the concept. The average Tom, Dick, and Harry in every part of this country can make meaningful participation in the tourism industry and can earn a tourism dollar from their neck of the woods. So you go to canneries where they have cassava, it will become a cassava heaven. Do it in there. You go to Labrie. What do you have in Labrie? The charm and everything. You go and get the Labrie charm. Ancillary, Fish Friday, Grocery. So every area, persons can capitalize on that, Mr. Speaker. Guess what? They were doing it with jazz as well. What did he do with jazz? He placed jazz at the hotels. He placed jazz and the tourism dollar that was brought about through jazz in the hands of the elitist tourism industry people. Not for participation by locals, Mr. Speaker. And today, you want to come and talk that kind of foolishness, Mr. Speaker. It's really unfair. It's really, really unfair, Mr. Speaker. And then you hear him talk about the deputy speaker and the Constitution says. The man was in Trinidad where he opened his mouth and he said the opposition is part of government. It's part of government, and I'm downstairs eating, Mr. Speaker, and I'm fuming. So in Trinidad, they are part of government because they want to form an association to approach all lending institutions. But today, the opposition is not part of government because it's convenient to speak from one side of his mouth at one point and the other side at a different point. How can you trust anything this man says? How can you trust it? Oh, we are part of government, we need to be heard. We are part of government. But for the appointment of a deputy speaker, it serves the narrative to say you are not part of government. And then talk about, you wrote the various agencies and disciplines and this and that about contemplating a breach of the Constitution. This was the very man, Mr. Speaker, when he was told he breached the Constitution by convening Parliament in excess of 30 days after a general election. What was his response? The Constitution stipulates no sanctions, so he can do as he please. That's what he said. That is what he said about a blatant breach of the Constitution. And today, nobody has told you, nobody has given you an iota of an idea that we will breach the Constitution. You're already writing in contemplation. A man who blatantly breached the Constitution with total impunity. So, Mr. Speaker, and then he went on talking about we were against investors. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, and I'm asking the Honorable Prime Minister, the member from Castries East, to permit me at this point to breach cabinet secrecy. The Prime Minister has always indicated to his ministers, never, ever, ever blame the beneficiary of a good deal. He has always said so. He has said to us, you don't blame anybody who got a good deal at the hands of a Prime Minister. Blame the person who facilitated it. So nobody has been against Cabot. I have never for once been against Cabot. Never. I have been against the mechanisms that were used, in my view, to unjustly enrich Cabot. That is my position. I have no difficulty, absolutely none, with and he speaks of foreign. Which of those people are foreign direct investors? Which of them are foreign direct investors? Persons come from Canada. We lend them our pensioners' money to buy property in our country, and you call them foreign direct investors? How can they be? And I'm not blaming Cabot. I'm blaming the facilitator. Mr. Speaker, I can say this. For Jazz last year, I met the owner of the Diamol who bought it from government, and he was bold enough to say to me, Mr. Richard, you are a businessman. If it's you that get up, why you would have take it too? This is what he told me. He referred to the deal as a bois.
Member for Castle Central. I do appreciate the history, but I'm hoping at some point in time your contribution even slightly collides with the motion.
Yes, definitely, Mr. Speaker. That is why initially I said that this bill is intended to bring reprieve. The motion, sorry, is intended to bring reprieve to each and every person in this country, no matter where you may find yourself, and to partake in the distribution of the tourism dollar. But you see, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the member from Miku South made some allegations that are totally incorrect. Totally incorrect, Mr. Speaker. And he talk about training. He talk about training. Mr. Speaker, yes, we have to train our people to be prepared to embrace the tourism industry wholeheartedly and the tourism product. I understand that, but when you tell me that a minister of finance would put one school in his budget, one school, CHTTI, a private school, finds itself in our national budget to be funded by taxpayers, owned by the wife of a member of parliament, but the funding is on our books, the expense to be shouldered by us. And then you talk about training, Mr. Speaker. How can there be egalitarianism? How can there be equality? How can there be? How would there not be conflict of interest? And so one set of people were being trained. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? They still left the bills for this government to pay, if I'm correct. They still left the bills for us to pay. Notwithstanding, those persons who may have been trained for the hospitality industry were given tags of a political flavor. And those are the realities, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to, but he has run out, obviously. I wanted to make the point that, you know, with all the expertise and experience, as Minister of Tourism, you did not build one room. As Prime Minister, you did not build one room. You know, you do absolutely nothing to enhance our tourism product. And you cannot stand here and basically, Mr. Speaker, you know, the jazz is a derivative of tourism, or jazz essentially is a pivot around which tourism revolves. When you take that and you centralize it, what are you doing? Are you not taking the whole concept of village tourism away from the jazz activity, Mr. Speaker? Are you not? But obviously, when you have it in Marchand and Soufrière and Ancillary and Canneries and Deriso, even in his constituency, there was jazz. There was jazz. But under his watch, he centralized it, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this government, in every policy that is rolled out, one can see quite clearly, quite blatantly, the interest of the average St. Lucian being taken cognizance of, and we are doing whatever we can to facilitate the growth of our people. That having been said, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion.
Member for Castries South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that this House stands suspended until 2:45.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do stand suspended until 2:45. I now put the question. As many as of the opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended.
Rise.
Yeah. Try writing that. Try writing that. And I come for lunch, you tell me. No, of course.